Hello everybody, welcome to Frame Trap. I am your host, Ben Moore. Today I am joined by Bradley Ellis.
Yo.
And Brandon Jones.
Yo.
So we are still in quarantine, and I just wanted to ask you guys, have you had more time to like catch up on things, maybe games or movies or TV shows? Like, has this weird situation given you any extra space for stuff?
Yes, I've had time, and it's been nice, actually.
What have you been doing with it?
I got to play Chrono Cross. I actually finished the game.
Nice.
The longest backlog game I've ever had in my life. Finally done. Started to watch some Westerns, actually. I haven't seen a Western in a long time, so I asked Michael Huber to give me the best Westerns. And so I started Unforgiven last night.
Brad,
it's pretty damn good.
It would have been
really
funny
good.
if he would have just given you a list of the best Westerns.
I was going to say, yeah.
He said it was his favorite
Sausalito
one.
is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'll start with that one.
Which one did he say was his favorite?
Unforgiven.
Okay. Nice.
Tombstone, Brad. Tombstone.
I've seen Tombstone before,
Okay.
but it's been a long time.
Cool,
I should probably watch it again anyways.
I'm not as forceful as Huber about those things, but that, oh man, I love
Yeah.
that movie.
I've been in
It's
the
really
mood.
good. And it's good on just like, so Unforgiven's really great. It's just like so sad. Like the majority of the time.
It's super slow paced, super sad.
Tombstone's just a great package of just humor and great cast. And Desperado, wait, I think it's a fun one. It's Jeff Goldblum, a very young Kevin Costner. Oh, it's not Desperado. It's damn, I can't. Oh man, what is the I can't remember the name of it. Something Auto. Silverado.
I've never even heard of that.
Crazy cast. Just a lot of people. A lot of people in that cast. So be like, it's that guy. But Kevin Kline, good movie.
Well, I haven't even seen a lot of the old Clint Eastwood ones still. So I'm like, I got to get to all those.
Yep.
Like that trilogy and everything.
Good, Bad, and the Ugly is my favorite of all of his.
Brandon, how about you? Anything you've been chipping away at?
No, not in the sense of. I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake. I've been playing a ton of Animal Crossing. So, like, I just have, like, big games that have taken up a lot of my time. I'm happy that I've been able to play as much Animal Crossing as I have. I'm happy that, like, I'm not, like, tired of it at all. And that, like, I've had, at least, like, an hour every day. Maybe, like, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there.
Man, the last couple of days, I felt really bad because I haven't been able to put any significant amount of time in Animal Crossing. But I make sure to log in just to get the 300 Nook Miles.
Yeah.
And like do a quick tour of the shops, but yeah, I haven't done my huge island redesign that I want to do yet.
I went at that ATM one day and they were like, we'll just give you these miles, but you lost your streak. And I was like, what? Huh?
My streak.
It's like I missed a day. I was like,
yeah, it's the worst feeling.
Man.
It sucks.
That sucks.
I mean, but yeah, it's you're never quite done. It's so funny, Ben. I do the island hop every week, and a lot of people's islands I go to, they're like, it's a work in progress. I'm like, they all are.
Yeah.
We're gonna play this game for 8 months. We'll still be like, I just want to put something over there. But one thing that a habit that I've gotten into that I have not done since the early days of Easy Allies was when I first had my office set up in the garage. I would put on something in the background. I would just put on like something on Netflix, something that was really pretty and colorful, sci-fi, with just the volume off, like while I cut a podcast. And since I've been doing the podcast, I'm hosting, moderating now, I got to get love and respect questions and look for a good bet. And there's just a lot of stuff I have to do that doesn't involve me listening to or manipulating video or audio. It's just research. And so it's like, I'll put on the Equalizer 2. Sure. Or I'll put on, just something, Sicario 2. Just like any random movies Huber's thrown at me in the last 2 or 3 years, and just dig into, that Amazon Prime Video, subscription. I just went hard on the MCU a couple weeks ago and just rewatched like Thor 1, Thor 2, first Captain America, just like a lot of movies that I can just kind of half pay attention to because I've seen them or I'm not like super invested. And that's been great. It's been nice to, I'll just be like, I'll be eating dinner with Amanda and I'll bring up some random movie. And she's like, when the hell did you watch that? And I'm like, just put it on in the background.
It's funny you say that, Brandon, because I'm sure that's what Frame Trap is for so many people, where they're just like, I'll just put it on the background. And it's great to have those things. Speaking of Prime Video, though, man, I was gonna say I'm in a horror mood, but I think I'm always down for horror. I'm learning that it's not a mood; it's just kind of a constant state. I've just been watching like every Friday the 13th, like just going through all of them on part 5, and they're all they're not all on Prime Video, but 1 through 5 definitely are, and that's been fun.
Yeah,
it's just like part 3 doesn't have a plot. It's just like, all right, teenagers are having sex and this guy comes and kills them. Like, there really is not, it's the loosest plot you could possibly have. Not that I have high expectations for it, but it's great. It's fun. It's fun.
I rewatched The Cabin in the Woods. Did you see that?
I have
Joss
seen
Whedon
it.
script?
I've only seen it once, though, and I really liked it when I saw it. But
holds up.
I could do it for a rewatch.
A pre-Thor Chris Hemsworth, who's like super tall and muscular and chiseled, but like compared to Thor Chris Hemsworth, he looks like a wee lad.
Yeah.
But that's a very funny movie.
I feel like
that held up on my second viewing.
That movie, though, like you go into it for the twists, right? And it does. It takes some pretty crazy turns, and I wonder if like knowing that stuff worries
it does
the rewatch,
because you pick up on all the jokes. Like you if you not only know what's going on, but you know the fates of some of those characters. It's kind of fun to see how they tease that stuff.
Gotcha.
And you know, if there's just a lot of people in that world that know quote unquote what's going on, and so when you're on their page, then you pick up. There's a lot of little notes. I was like, oh, that guy just wasn't being a jerk. He actually was commenting on something they were going to find out an hour later. But yeah, I'm always down for new horror. Horror is really great with on-demand video.
Yes.
You're very forgiving.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that sentiment completely.
I watched all the Saw films like a year and a half ago, and like there was no expectations at all.
Yeah.
But I could not stop watching them because it was like a season of television almost, you know, because like one movie would just roll right into the next one.
Man, Saw.
So I'm just like, Saw 6, fine, let's go. So I've seen Jigsaw.
I think I've seen up through Saw 5. Saw 1, I still really like Saw 1.
Yeah, it's a very clever film.
Yeah. It just kind of goes downhill, unfortunately. But I don't know. I'd have to rewatch. Speaking of checking things out, though, Brad and Jones, I'm gonna have you lead this discussion. But Brad, you've also been checking out Mafia II Definitive Edition.
Yeah, I got to play it like for an hour today or so. Got a feel for the
Dipping
game.
your toes in.
Yeah.
But Brendan, you had not played Mafia 2 before. I played the original Mafia 2, so I have that as a point of reference. But man, I don't want to. I hear this definitive edition is kind of a hot mess. That's the word on the street.
Yeah, here's the thing though. It's so funny. I'm trying to remember my history with remasters, comparing remasters of games that I have played versus ones I have not. And I haven't like touched Mafia 2. I am loving it.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's really interesting. And this happens every now and then. This happened also with Ghost Recon, where I was just like, oh yeah, this is the comfort food I need. And then I was playing, and then I like 3 days later, I bumped into Huber, and Huber's like, I'm pulling my hair out right now with this stupid game. And I'm like, wait, what? Oh, like, yeah, I guess you're right. You know, and then I like put my Huber goggles on, and I'm like, oh, you know, like, yeah, he's right. You know,
The beauty of
like,
ignorance.
It just looks like a remaster. Like there's something about, especially like skin textures. There's just something about when you boot up a game and you tell it's like the best version of a game that shouldn't look this good. You know, that like it's kind of got like the Silent 2 thing where you're like, no, I need the fog. Like this shouldn't be that bright. That draw distance is too good actually, because it really makes the world feel small now. And it's so strange with performance in remasters, how like they're still popping, still framing. You take a corner too fast in a car and just like, whoa, it chugs.
The framiness is what would kill me the most, I think.
Yeah, but it's like being in the end of this gen now, going and back playing something I probably would have played on 360 at the time. I'm really focused on the story. I'm really focused on the world, the characters. I think the thing that I love most about it is, one of the things that I've always found fascinating is how some open world games wrestle with passage of time, because like in GTA, you can do stuff at any time. Someone will call you and be like, hey, come on by, and you're like, all right. And then in game time, you don't go see that person for 2 weeks, but when you see them, they act like I just called you. And so some games just don't even worry about it. And then you have something like Spider-Man, which is like, no, the world is locked right now. Like, it is afternoon forever until you finish the story and move on. And I thought that was interesting, because I definitely felt if I was playing it for 3 hours and it was nighttime, I kind of felt a little more attached to actually the natural flow of time. And that, like, well, if I was in New York and it was 10 p.m. to 1 p.m., yeah, it would still look like this. So, like, I kind of got in the head sync with Spider-Man. And with Mafia 2, it's chapter-based. And so when I go buy a new outfit, it's like the next day. So I don't get a sense of like, oh, I wore this outfit for 5 days. Like, I didn't. I really just wore it for a day, So like I am actually really immersed in the world. I don't want to spoil too much for people that are interested in checking it out, but like, it goes places. It rarely settles with one character relationship or one circumstance for very long, especially in just the first 5-6 hours. Like there are lots of ups and downs, passages of time, characters coming and going, and so I was surprised, like, how just kind of immediately wrapped I was in it. And I felt bad because I kept thinking of all the jolly Huber vibes. You start out and it's winter, it's Christmas, like, I'm turning on the radio, there's all these classic songs from the 40s, like, oh, this is great. Then I jump on Slack and Huber's like, yeah. Like, oh no. But he's talking about the remaster, whereas I'm enjoying Mafia 2. So it's interesting, like, we're both kind of experiencing two different things.
Everything you're saying about Mafia 2 holds true to my experience. My memory of it is definitely hazy, but I walked away from that game being really attached to the story and the characters, like you were saying, and just how they sell the family vibe. I think very strongly in Mafia 2. Something that was a complaint, it didn't really bother me that much, and I know Huber argues very passionately against this, but the most common complaint at the time with Mafia 2 was how worthless the open world felt, where there wasn't really anything to do other than travel from point to point. How is that affecting you at all? I know somebody especially who loves open worlds and things to do in them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm so focused on the story. I think I was a little rushed. I wanted to play as much of it before today, and so that definitely affected my decision making. Whereas if I was just kind of like, whatever, it's I mean, it has been a long time since after the original came out. But if I wasn't playing it for a specific thing we were working on, maybe I would look for other entertainment. But I actually really enjoy activity-wise, yes, but I really do enjoy just the flavor of the world. Like I said, there's passages of time, so weather changes, and one thing is you go up a lot of stairs to get to your apartment, and they do a great job at different points in the story adding people to that staircase. Like I went by, and the either a lady that lives on the floor or the lady that owns the building was just like listening in on one apartment.
Yeah, I actually saw that too.
And I go by her, and he's like, "What is this? Nothing on TV?" And she's like, "Man, you own business." And like, there's just a lot of that stuff. Like, even just a guy with the bottle in his hand, just sitting on the sidewalk, like, like there was two homeless guys and a dog like arguing and yelling at each other just out the window when I walked down the stairs one time, and I like watched them for a little bit and was like, oh, cool. There's just a lot of that fun stuff. In one of the passage of time jumps, there's a great thing with music, because in the 40s, there's like, it's at the height of World War II, so the radio will stop every now and then and talk about, what's going on with the war effort and what you can do, preserve rubber, preserve gas, and then you jump to the 50s, and it's a completely different vibe. It's much more colorful. The music changed. So I really feel the world kind of come alive, and I really do dig it. But it's nothing I would pin on the remaster. It's nothing it's like, oh, finally they brought this world to life. It really just feels like the way the game was built. So activity wise, I'm not too hung up on that so far. It kind of feels like general open world, kind of par for the course.
I wonder if we're gonna reach a point where they are like making games set during the time of the coronavirus. We'll have that experience.
Yeah.
Whoa, I lived through this. That was because I don't have that attachment to, like, I didn't go through World War II, and so it's different for me than it would be.
Well, Ben, I was talking to Amanda about that, because Amanda's like waiting for, she's doing voiceover stuff and commercials, but like a lot of these industries are slowing down. It's like the writer strike. Like, we haven't really felt the impact of it yet. And it's going to be interesting when all of this is over, when we're out of it and we're like, please don't say the words COVID or face mask or,
Right.
it's like just enough. I don't want to, I finally got a haircut. Like, just stop. And like all of entertainment's going to be like, well, my COVID movie's done. And we're like, we don't want to see that, Like 9/11's a different thing because it's like, that was that was like a day, that like we all had to wrestle with for a long period of time. And so there were so many different angles of it that like after a passage of time, it was interesting to go back and see what firefighters went through, see what paramedics went through, see what people on, the planes and so on. Whereas in this, it's just, I think the world is just going to be so ready to move on. Right. And I imagine there's so many writers out there that are just like, I have to tell my story. Mm-hmm. I have to get this off my chest. And like, I don't know if that audience is going to be there. One thing about the world of Mafia 2 I dig is it's a little confusing because it's New York, but they call it Empire City. Mm-hmm. But then you also go to Sicily. So it's like sometimes in open world games, I find that confusing. Like in GTA worlds, I didn't even think about this until somebody brought it up, or like I was playing GTA 5 and I was like, oh, it is a little weird that like it's clearly not our world, but the music is. Like you're hearing music from our world, but you're in cities that are not. They're like, yeah, Compton, and it's like there's no Compton. Like that's not a thing in this world. But like we're still, it's kind of like the dimensions are crossing over. There is an outside of New York and an inside of New York, and they pace that out really well. Where you live in different places, and whenever you're like off of the island of Manhattan, it's neat to look over the river and see the Empire State Building and the skyline, and it makes it feel so much bigger than it actually is. When you're actually in New York, it doesn't feel like as big of a bustling city as it probably was at the time.
Sure.
But one of the reasons why the original Red Dead is one of my favorite open world games is the amount of people riding around on horseback, the amount of people walking around in each town feels proportionate to how many buildings there are. Mm-hmm. Whereas like when GTA 5 came out, people were like, it's LA 1-to-1. It's like, it's very much not. It's like 2% of the size of the county of Los Angeles. Where this it's like, yeah, I bet there'd be this many cars on the road in the 40s, or this many people in a shop or at any given time. It does. It's like Assassin's Creed. It's just fun to be in a different era and just kind of listen to it and get a vibe for what the pace of living was like at that time.
How is the combat treating you?
Probably my least favorite. I don't really think about it. I'm not really attached to guns. Like the cars are kind of fun. You can tune them up and color them and stuff. Yeah. But like guns, I go on a mission. A guy drops a shotgun. I grab the shotgun. Like it wasn't something where it was like, oh, finally I got the Tommy gun. It was just like, oh, I'm out of bullets. Well, I'll just get one on the next level. The one thing that I do like about the combat is I'm playing on medium. Usually the difficulty is called normal, but it's easy, medium, hard, and it's just what it defaulted to. If you get hit like 4 or 5 times, you're out. And the checkpoints are not forgiving. There was one mission where like I was like right at the end, and then went like 10 minutes earlier. Oh. But I kind of like like you get out of cover and a guy hits you with a shotgun, you get back into cover, and you can't just you'll regenerate a little bit of that health. But I do kind of like, it feels brutal in some of those shootouts. So you kind of have to memorize, like, there's another guy on the other side of this door. I can't just walk into that room. Because there were times I'm like, oh, time to run up the staircase. And, like, I just would walk right into a guy and get taken out. So.
Yeah, with Mafia 3, it was interesting because Mafia 2, I feel like everything that I remember and appreciate from that game has to do with, like, the scenarios that they put you in, the characters that you're interacting with, and the story that they're telling. And, like you were saying, being attached to those characters. With Mafia 3, I felt like playing it was such a chore, and I like only cared about the story to such a sharp degree that I almost just wished it was a movie, because I wasn't enjoying like playing it at all. Versus Mafia 2, where a lot of the like shooting and playing it, it wasn't like the thing that was sticking out to me, but I didn't hate it, I guess.
Yeah.
It was serviceable enough. Brad, outside of the little bit that you spent with Mafia 2, do you have any Mafia experience? I know Huber, obviously very important to him.
No, it's always just something I've kind of seen it from afar with Huber.
Sure. Would it be one of those things where you'd like go over to his house and he'd be playing Mafia 1 or something?
Yeah,
Did that happen?
Yeah, all the time on his computer.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know Huber, back in the GT days when we did levels, he did one on Mafia 1, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he loves Mafia 1.
Yeah.
I like that you get nailed for speeding And the guys, I think in Mafia 1 you get in trouble if you run a red light, but in this one you have to, it's only speeding.
Yeah, it's only speeding in this one.
But
which is weird, but
I
it's fun.
completely forgot about that in Mafia 2.
Yeah. If you speed past a cop, they'll get upset. But I mean, if you're going that fast, you probably will like zip past them. There's a car, I mentioned this, I think on the podcast, but there's a car from Mafia 3. There's also his coat from Mafia 3 in Mafia 2,
and the first game, I think.
So you can just drive like a 70s hot rod in Mafia 2 and just not belong at all in this world.
That's fun though.
Yeah, I'm a little too immersed to break it that way. But actually, Mafia 2 did something unexpectedly to me, Ben, that I've always sympathized with people that just hate Grand Theft Auto stories. I love their sense of humor. I love meeting those new characters. I love how over the top it gets. But I've talked to people a lot before that are just like, I can't take that world seriously. I hate the story. I buy those games. I run around a little bit and then I'm done. I'm getting a little closer to understanding, for some reason, with the way that Mafia 2 is presenting its story, with what people say about the GTA series, because Mafia 2 isn't a parody. It's like an homage to these other things, and GTA is definitely a parody, and it's, I'm really understanding the crystal clear difference between those things, in that like there are moments like there's like a mission I'll start a Mafia or I'll be like, it's Goodfellas, I'm like, okay, I see, they want me to be a part of that fantasy, but they're taking it very seriously. So like they can manage to do both at the same time, where like I'm still connected to these characters, but like I'm clearly in Shawshank Redemption right now. So I wouldn't say I like one more or the other, but like I definitely am. It's one of the things I'm really enjoying about this is like I'm not really invested in the story because the twists and turns are just so shocking, but it's because it's so muted in how it really just kind of lets me soak up its world, and like there's your sister, there's your mom, there's your old friend, there's that mob boss, you'll meet him later, like I really love the pace. It's not too slow, it's not too fast. It's very different from other open world games that I've played, and so I appreciate it for that. There's just a lot of games for this job that I pick up and I'm like, okay, I'm ready for Frame Trap. All right, I got to move on to other things. And like, I'm finishing the story, no question. I'm very, very curious to see where this goes.
I think the problem that I've had with Grand Theft Auto in the past, and this might just be a personal thing, is sometimes I would struggle because I would have so much fun just causing chaos, or like finding my own fun, or just like, okay, I really want to find a super fast car, or whatever my made up objective was. I would have a blast, and then I'd go. And like some of the missions in Grand Theft Auto would be awesome, but I would run into like that one mission where it's like, I don't want to do this like thing that it's asking me to do either doesn't control well or it's boring or whatever. And so I would always struggle with that with Grand Theft Auto, where it's like, well, why would I go and do these missions if I'm just having more fun, like basically making my own game or whatever. So yeah, that's always weird.
And you can't really sandbox Mafia 2. You can't pull your gun out unless you're on a mission.
Yeah.
You can't, you can like hit people with your car, but like you can't, like and I love it. It definitely is, it's like you are this character in this world. All of the decisions, all the opportunities that we give you, the flexibility, the freedom has to fit what, what your character would likely do.
It's definitely more about soaking it in, as you said.
Yeah.
Brad.
Yes.
Man, I'm really curious about this game. You reviewed, I didn't even know you were reviewing it, but you reviewed Maneater. A game where you play as a shark and you eat a ton of people.
It's an open world game where you're a shark.
Yeah.
Open world RPG where you're a shark, yeah.
This was something that I think was really fun to watch at the PC Gaming Show during E3. Just the concept seemed very funny and interesting. How is it as a full-fledged game?
So it's pretty short, actually, for an open world. So what you might think of an open world RPG, it's pretty short. It's like 11 hours. It took me 11 hours to 100% the game.
Okay.
But it wasn't like, man, it felt really short. It ended when I felt like it should have ended.
Okay.
I was kind of like glad. I'm like, good. It didn't overstay its welcome, kind of thing.
Something in the trailers, they were. It seemed like they were definitely building up a coherent story for it. Like it wasn't just a gimmick. They have a narrative around this game.
Yeah, there's a narrative. Yeah.
Was that fulfilling to see through to the end?
Yeah, I guess it's like a very simple narrative. Like the whole premise of the game, or like its story, is filmed like you're watching like a reality TV show that follows like this hunter named Scaly Pete, and his kind of whole scenario. So basically, the beginning of the game is you play as a shark. The hunter catches you, kills the shark, then he pulls out a baby shark out of the mother shark, and that's who you'll play as in the game. And you bite off his arm, and he throws you in the water. Then the rest of the game is like you starting as a little shark, then getting bigger and bigger and bigger to finally have a showdown with him.
Nice. Okay. So you're basically evolving as a shark.
Yes.
Is that evolution, like, do you see pretty substantial changes to what you can do, like, in and out of the water?
So yeah, you start real small, of course. Like, eventually you're gonna get pretty massive. You're gonna be bigger than great whites. But what's the most fun part is your shark, you kind of have, like, equipment slots. So you can equip different types of, like, I used to be, like, a different, like, shark type. So there's, like, a different fin type. There's, like, shadow, bone, and, like, electricity. And they all have, like, their own advantages. Like, shadow has lifesteal on it. The bone is great for, like, messing up ships. It has bonus damage. And the electric one can stun enemies. And so you put these on your shark, and it changes the way your shark looks. And you can also upgrade these throughout the game to make them even stronger. And when you get, like, the whole set, you put on the set, you get a nice little set bonus. Very, like, old school, like, MMO almost.
Cool.
With your gear pieces.
Man, I feel like this is a perfect game for streaming as well.
Dude, it's a game you can just, like, hop in and have a good time with.
So you're the...
Go ahead. Sorry, and I feel bad, but you... I don't know if we score drop here on Frame Trap, but
you can score
when
drop.
I got your...
you can score drop it?
When I got your score, Brad, for that, I was like, yep, that's kind of what I expected.
I'm going to guess 7.5.
That's exactly what it was, yeah.
I did not know that. I mean, I saw other places give it 7, but I didn't know what we gave it.
But it's like, it makes me wonder, like, could Maneater be better than a 7.5? Should it be better than a 7.5? If you're developing Maneater and you're trying to push for that 8.5, are you working too hard? Like, there's just some games that just should be fun. They just should be.
Yeah.
But like, could a Katamari Damacy ever be a 10? You know, because
some would argue it already is.
I know, but like I approach that series for what it is, to get a specific amount of enjoyment, and so it's funny. Like I think they made the game I was expecting, at least. And I'm curious.
Definitely. So it's what's there is really strong and solid. Like everything works fine, or from what I played it on. But the problem with the game is just like the repetition.
Yeah.
You're a shark. Pretty much everything you're gonna do is gonna be eating stuff, and it's like. Most of the missions are like eat 10 people, eat 10 turtles, fight this like shark, and that's kind of like the whole game.
Yeah.
And they don't really do a lot to surprise you. You're kind of like doing like you're fighting like just normal humans basically throughout the whole game. They rarely do anything to change it up. Like the most changing up is just kind of the locations you go to. But you very much will be doing the same things over and over and over again.
Brad, my biggest concern with this game is, like, you were calling it short at 11 hours, and I totally get where you're coming from. I think my worry is that, like, I'll play an hour, and that hour is all I'll ever need. Like,
maybe.
Yeah.
Because, like, I feel like when you start off, you're so limited.
I see.
With your shark, but once you start getting bigger, so some areas are locked, like shortcut stuff, but once you get bigger, you can actually break through them.
Yeah.
There's like a little type of progression, like your gear pieces. Like you don't get a lot of these until you're bigger, like further on in the game. So you always kind of have something to work for.
Do you think on the flip side of the progression, right, where you're getting more things that you can do, are the enemies or human beings that you're eating or the sharks that you're fighting, like, are they also progressing in interesting ways? Where it's like I have to take a different tactic.
Not really.
Okay.
So yeah, there's like a wanted system style thing in this game where if you cause too much trouble, some bounty hunters are going to try to come and get you. There's 10 levels to it. Each level has a unique bounty hunter, and they're all pretty much the same. Like fighting them is exactly the same until like the last two. They like have like an electric field around their boat, and you have to like do something different you haven't done. But that's about it.
Okay. I guess I don't really want to like spoil it since it is the final thing, but building up, having like kind of the whole narrative rest on the final showdown. Did you feel like that was satisfying, or did it feel just kind of more of the same?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like, so the story in this game is not gonna like enthrall you by any means. it's just there to keep you kind of going. But I was kind of interested to see how it ended, and how it ended. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a game about being a shark. Like, how it ended is like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm cool with that. But I wasn't like, dude, fuck yeah, that was sick. But I was like, all right. Like, if you like movies like Jaws and stuff, you will like this game.
Is it?
I like movies like Jaws and stuff.
Do you know,
Yes.
Brad, if it's a $60 game?
It's 40.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's
Interesting.
$40.
Knock it down.
Yeah.
I like it.
So, but yeah, it's a good time. Like, what's there is really fun. You'll have a good time doing it, but it's not going to blow you away.
Cool.
Brad, do you, when you just surface, do people freak out? Like if there's a bunch of swimmers on the beach and you just kind of pop to the surface and like,
Yeah,
I haven't bitten
but, like-
anybody or doing anything, do they see you and like...
Yeah, they freak out. Like, you know, their degrees of freaking out vary depending.
Sure.
Like, you know, they're just kind of like, sometimes they're just kind of weird and stand there. Sometimes they run away. I don't know. It's kind of inconsistent. But I definitely got the vibe because there's like people screaming, stuff like that. If you're really into Jones, I almost wrote this in the review. I had a humor moment, and I was like, man, I should really talk about how satisfying it is to crunch someone and hear them screaming underwater.
Oh, the different... Oh, no.
And I was like, I don't know if I need to write that. But that was definitely my humor moment.
I've had moments like that in reviews where you're like talking about how satisfying the violence is, and you have that pullback moment where you're like, I sound like a psychopath. Like the point in this game is to kill stuff.
Like, you're a psychopath in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
But sometimes you feel that disconnect between where you're like, wait, what the hell
I was just like, oh, it'll probably just come across in the footage. I don't know if I need Jones to say that out loud or something.
Well, I got something that I'm very excited to talk about. I'm also a little bit frustrated because, you know, Nintendo embargoes are always tricky beasts. They're usually pretty restrictive.
Yes.
And some of the, like, one thing in particular that I can't talk about, I'm like, why can't I talk about it? But I've been playing Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition for review, and I went into this review knowing that this was a massive game, but I'm like 45, somewhere around there, hours into it, and I'm like, oh my god, like, this game is so big.
What are you, like, halfway through?
Yeah, I'm like halfway. It's giant. It's giant. But it's really interesting because my first playthrough, it wasn't the first time I had played it ever, but the first time I had gone all the way through it was on a stream. And that's very different than just playing it on your own. And I feel like I'm having a slightly different experience not having an audience. And like some things annoy you more. And I think you also appreciate other things a little bit more. And first of all, getting this out of the way, like a lot of games use the moniker like Definitive Edition. Like Mafia II, I believe, uses Definitive Edition.
All three.
Yeah.
For different reasons.
I feel like Xenoblade Chronicles really earns it. Like, man, the facelift is super nice. Particularly... Like, facelift is a perfect word for it because just the faces in general. I was a little bit weirded out, I think, by, like, Ryan at first, one of your party members, but I've gotten used to him. And just, like, seeing them side by side, the original version and the definitive edition, it's like, wow, this is a really big upgrade. But I think beyond that, what I appreciate more even than just the character models being upgraded, right, and the like things looking better is the UI. One of my biggest complaints with Xenoblade Chronicles was how much of a pain in the ass the UI was. And it's a lot better here. Just in terms of like changing equipment and sorting through things, they've kind of cleaned it up where I feel like it's faster and it's more readable. And so like a good example of that is in the original version of Xenoblade Chronicles, when you get into somebody's like inventory, it's just like, okay, I'm looking at all of their weapons, but like I can't see at a glance what everything is like easily. Whereas now it's like, oh, here's names for everything. I feel like it's just like I can quickly get to what I want more easily. It's like, oh, that thing, that's what I want. I want to sell that or I want to equip that or whatever. Just more readable in general. But the game is notorious for its side quests, which are still very bad. But they made them more digestible. So now when you do a side quest, you can see like on the minimap, like this is exactly what I need to kill. This is exactly what I need to go. You can set things as active quests so they'll appear on your minimap. And so the problem with the side quests is there's like an unholy amount of them. Like if you are playing this game for the first time, it is like MMO level of side quests. And they're just not that interesting. So one of the biggest disappointments for me is like some of the setups, like some of the context around the side quests are like kind of cool, but your characters do a lot of like canned responses where it's like they accept a side quest and they say the same thing, like, oh, I better help out. You know, that's essentially the spirit of it. And they just kind of say that canned response over and over and over again. What I will say in defense of the side quests is sometimes the rewards you get are very valuable, like some of the gems you get, or just the experience can be really nice. Like you will notice that. And since I'm not doing it on stream, I'm spending a lot more time with the side quests. And it's like, oh, things that were harder for me on the stream are a lot easier now. You also get to, it's a good reason to explore the world. And the world in Xenoblade Chronicles is a star. Like, it's awesome just, like, finding a secret area or a rare monster or just, like, a huge view. Like, Xenoblade Chronicles does a really excellent job of being like, we're going to send you to these areas and they're going to feel massive and they're going to feel dangerous. And so, you know, the one defense that I have for the side quests is, like, it is an excuse to get out there and interact with stuff, which is cool. But I am so excited. Like, Brad, I know you're going to be checking out Xenoblade Chronicles. Like, it was one of those things where I finished it, and I was like, that's one of my favorite RPGs. Like, I just was so high on it, and replaying it, right? I still feel that way. Like, this game does so many cool things. I really stand behind a lot of its cast. But what I stand behind more than anything else, I think, outside of the world and the exploration, is the mystery that it builds. It really builds a fascinating mystery. And, you know, you start the game by learning that these people are basically living on the remnants of this Titan. And kind of as you slowly unravel why that is, they really keep you on the hook. And like, you want to pay attention to what's going on because they're building that mystery so well. But yeah, I don't know. I really do think like Xenoblade Chronicles lives up to the hype. I do think that the side quest thing especially is one of its biggest weaknesses. But man, even the combat is so good. Because unfortunately you can't switch between party members during a fight, but outside of combat you can switch between party members, and everybody plays so differently. Like, yes, things fall into like the healer tank damage dealer role, but they're like really crazy twists on them. So like your mage, you can summon these elements behind you and you can shoot them off for damage, but if you leave them on, they'll give your party like buffs. And so you kind of have that dynamic of like, well, do I want the damage or do I want to give my party more strength or like passive HP regeneration, all that stuff. And so, not to get too much into the weeds, but I would recommend that if you are playing this game, don't just play as Shulk. Shulk is really, really good, and you're going to want to keep him around, but definitely go out of your way to experiment and see what everybody is capable of. It's pretty fun from a variety standpoint.
Hell yeah, dude.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
dude.
Ben, I don't mind side quests at all.
Yeah, you're speaking Joe's language.
So you're like, everything that I'm saying, you're like, this doesn't bother me at all.
Well, it's funny because are they unlimited? Like, are they that bad that they just recycle? It's just kind of like the same.
They're not unlimited. It's definitely like you can sweep through an area, but even that is kind of annoying because certain side quests you'll only find at certain times of day, and like some side quests can only be completed at like very specific times where it's like, okay, you're only going to encounter this monster during a thunderstorm.
Got it.
The other thing that is lame that they do, and I don't understand why they do this, is you'll get a side quest from somebody, and then so there's an exclamation mark above their head, you know, classic like WoW style, when they have a side quest, and you'll get the side quest from them, and then they'll just immediately have another exclamation mark. It's like, oh, this person has 4 side quests, but rather than just like getting them all at once, I have to like keep talking to them. But yeah, Brandon, especially for you, and like I don't mind grinding either. Like, it's kind of nice just getting overpowered and getting like the most optimal equipment. I do find kind of an innate satisfaction to that in that, and I think this is like kind of a game made for you in a way. Like you just get lost in it.
I've long adored it from afar.
Yeah.
It's like me with like chips and guacamole at a Mexican restaurant before dinner, where you just like, I'll go through 3 bowls and then like finally like my burritos are here and I'm like I couldn't.
Yeah.
I've just been eating chips and guac for like an hour, and like that's where I'm at a lot of times with RPGs. And especially if you were saying if you could feel those gains, if you just get a little bonus here, a little something, even if they're tiny, like any little advantage. I'm a sucker for that stuff. I don't know when to stop.
Well,
so
I mean, there's just so many layers to it, and it's why just trying to get this game done for review. On one hand, it's nice because it's like, well, I'm not on stream, so I want to like explore the side stuff more. But then it's also like, I got to get this review done, and so I'm feeling the pressure from that end. But beyond the side quest, which there are, like when I say an unholy amount, that is like an accurate description. There are a ton. There's also like this collectopedia where you have like this book essentially, and you've got these rows, and if you fill all of them out, Brandon, you get a little reward, which is something that I do. Yeah, and then if you fill out the entire page, you get another reward on top of that.
No. Okay, second that I'm not playing this.
There's also Colony 6. So there are these human colonies, and Colony 6 is one that gets completely destroyed, and you can go and you can help rebuild it. So you can give them materials, and then they'll build different stuff. So it's like, well, I want more shops in this area. You can go and like help build up the commercial district or the residential district. And so there's just a ton of things to sink time into. But at the same time, I wish the side quest would be better. I do. I'm glad that that optional stuff is there for people who want to dig into it. And I also do think like the main story really holds up. I know people complain a lot about stories in JRPGs not being not very interesting or whatever, but I love the mystery and the vibe and just kind of how unique Xenoblade Chronicles feels. I know a lot of people were kind of pulled back from 2 because of how extremely anime it is, and there is definitely a lot of anime in Xenoblade Chronicles, but I do feel like it's more grounded than 2 is. So if kind of the anime extremities of 2 turns you away, I still think 1 might be worth giving a chance. If you are adverse to any anime in your RPGs, like this is not going to do it for you. But if you have a little bit of tolerance, I think 1 is worth checking out.
If I can level up the characters while also leveling up my anime, then
hell yeah,
Brandon, you're already an anime expert though. So like,
there's just always
you're at 100.
There's always
baby.
more. There's always more to learn.
Isn't there like post-game stuff now? New story thing?
There is.
That's super long?
Yeah, and so I haven't dug into that at all yet. Obviously, for the review...
This review.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, for the review, I'll go into it. And I wish... But I'm kind of just playing through the whole game again, and then I'll go into...
Can you hop in from the start?
You can. Yep, so it's...
That's sweet.
I mean...
That's really cool.
I should say, I guess to clarify, I haven't actually gone into the extra story mode from the main menu, but it is right there on the main menu when you boot up the game.
That's great,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
Brad, it's got that checklist of extra like monsters to find and stuff is Final Fantasy 14. That was something that I was like way into.
Yeah, the Hunter's Log, yeah.
It's just so simple.
That XP, baby.
It's just like, love it.
Yeah.
Check those off. What's that? What is that on everything? Is that on Xbox, PS4, and Switch,
just
or is
Switch.
that just the Switch?
It's first party.
Yep. Basically,
okay.
yeah.
Basically, yeah. Nintendo owns them, right? Monolith?
Do they?
I think they own them.
Because I know Monolith has done work for other platforms. I should know this. I believe they are. Fact checking.
Quick check, baby.
Originally owned by Namco until being bought by Nintendo in 2007.
Okay, yeah.
So there you go.
Cool. Good pickup, Nintendo.
Yeah. Cool. Guys, I actually have some good news. Some of the best news I've had on Frame Trap since this whole thing started. We don't have any Frame Trap demons today.
Dude, pure run.
Yeah, they've been in a war. So I want to introduce the Angels of Frame Trap. Of course,
Oh, you're making this Diablo
yeah,
now.
yeah. There always has to be two sides to everything, and right now the Angels of the Frame Trap realm are winning, and so they're not trying to get you. They're not trying to say any shame on Brandon for saying this. They are here to create a space for you guys to give a shout out to whatever you want. It doesn't even have to be a game, but maybe something you think deserves a little bit more attention. I could start us off if you need some time to think.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm only 4 episodes in, but I really like the Evil Dead series. So Evil Dead 1, 2, and I like the remake as well. But for some reason, I just thought a TV show about Evil Dead would suck, even though Bruce Campbell's in it.
Right.
But I've been giving Ash vs. Evil Dead a chance, and it's awesome. Like, I am shocked at how much I'm enjoying it. So if you're looking for something that is, like, violent and crass and fun, it feels like it captures the Evil Dead spirit, like, almost perfectly. I really dig it. I hope it stays good.
Yeah, I got one. I haven't even played it yet, but shout out to Xenoblade Edition for addressing my gripes with the first game and giving me a dream scenario to actually let me play the game.
The faces.
So the faces, the ugly standard def graphics in this huge world.
Yeah, everything is so much cleaner, man. Like that UI.
And all my complaints, they're like, oh, okay, well, here, we'll change it all for you specifically. Mm-hmm. So I feel like they catered to me specifically, and I'm all for it.
I would like to shout out our community for being absolutely wonderful during my Animal Crossing Island hops every week.
Oh, yeah.
Because that involves so many different levels of being awesome. Like the patience at I'll have some people send me a code. They're like, here's my friend code. Yeah, I would love to be a part of the stream. I'm like, okay, cool. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, they're like, where am I on the list? I'm like, far away. I have 200 plus people to go visit, and I've just barely cracked 100. Hopefully I will get to your island one of these days. But also I've been bouncing the stream times around, and so they'll be available at this time where I'm ready to stream, and then some of them will give me presents, and I feel bad because I'll see something that I really like, and I'm just like, oh, that's really cool, it's neat how you did that, and then the next day they'll send me a present in the mail. I'm like, you didn't have to do that, but yay. This wallpaper is so cool. And it's given the game longevity in a way I haven't experienced. I think I would still be playing this. I'm enjoying it enough just playing with Amanda every day and checking what's in her shop and sending her presents or doing stuff together.
I saw that Amanda was streaming some Hearthstone on.
Yeah, she's streaming Hearthstone.
Dude, sick.
Right now.
Oh,
she was streaming Hearthstone
shout
at least.
What's
yeah.
her?
She playing Demon Hunter?
So that she and her improv troupe, they're called Ripley Improv. Ripley as an alien Ripley. Ripley Improv, one word. So they're twitch.tv/Ripley Improv. And they individually, listeners of this program might be familiar with Jessica Linverdi, who's been on Fiasconauts and done some other stuff with us. And she is a part of Ripley, and there's others members of the team that have done a lot of stuff for Hyper RPG and Nerdist and Geek and Sundry. And so they're no strangers to live streaming and tabletop stuff. But they're finally getting their own channel up and running. And they're doing, I got 2 shout outs, nice. They're doing once a month. They're going to do a long form narrative improv, which will be really fun. It's kind of like Fiasconauts with they take the training wheels off. There's no rules that they need to follow. They literally just take a suggestion from chat, and then they tell a story for a full hour. And that was really fun because we've gotten better at this whole Zoom thing, but they're really doing a lot of fun creative things with backgrounds and one of them will get on one side of the screen, the other one will get on the other side. So when it cuts back and forth, they have somebody outside of the cast that's managing the edits, somebody outside of that's managing the music. And then, on that side, it's been fun for Amanda. She just, before I was getting ready for Frame Trap, she came in. She's like, I'm gonna stream Hearthstone. Is that okay? And I was like, please.
Nice.
But yeah, it's been fun for her to, just to experiment the joy of live streaming. The gift that keeps on giving.
Hell yeah, man.
I was only going to do one shout out, but Brandon, you made me think of it. And, it's my show. 2 shout outs. Let's go. You mentioned the community and being so awesome and understanding with your Animal Crossing streams. And I've had a similar experience with Ben's Dojo. And so I've wanted to bring back the fighting game streams at Ben's Dojo for a long time, but I think there was definitely some hesitation where I'm like, like it's just very competitive, and I hope people are understanding. Like as I'm learning, I'm not very good, and so I think that anxiety definitely got to me a little bit. But people have been awesome. Like they have been so helpful and just like chill, and it's like exactly what I would want anybody learning a fighting game to go through. Like no salt, like no antagonism really at all. Like just super good, fun, like let's play this game and get better at it vibes. It's like ideal in a way that I was not expecting. So shout out. And hey, if you want to if you've been intimidated by fighting games, I think they're pretty friendly streams. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Making this Caught in a Frame Trap happen, though, even though we're not caught in a frame trap, this moment of reflection happen is our wonderful shout out to your patrons. If you want to find out more information, go to patreon.com/easyallies, where you can check out this $250 tier. And today, what I wanted to do, I'm calling this like System of a Down style, where I will say a name and we'll go, shut up! Just as quick as you can possibly say it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
See where I'm coming from with that?
Very appropriate.
Yeah.
$250 worth of shout out.
Okay, so our first shout out is Blue.
Shut up! Shut up!
Caleb, Togi, Crawford.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Elthanas.
Shut up! Shut up!
Greg, TheDarkKnight, Kettering.
Shut up! Shut up!
And last but certainly not least, Jessie Blu.
Shut up! Shut up!
The brr. Sweet. Brandon Jones.
Yeah.
You have been playing. You streamed a game that I've never heard of before, and you said that you could talk about it on this episode of Frame Trap called Boot Hill Bounties.
Yeah, it's fun when we have the codes that float around. Like we're all little chicks up in the nest, and Mama Bloodworth flaps in, and caw, like all of us try to grab stuff. I am, have a lot of other things generally that I'm focused on other than, just the raw streaming, reviewing, games coverage. And so it is odd. I think one that I'm looking forward to actually is Lonely Downhill. That like biker game where you're just on a bike like barreling down. I messaged Blood and I was like, I want that.
He talked about it on Frame Trap, I believe.
I might stream that game. It looks fun. And so every now and then there's some things that I think are like up my alley. And I just got an email from Bloodworth and he's like, yeah, I got a JRPG Western. And I was like, sure. Isn't it hilarious? Like that's all it takes. And so the email that I got sent said Earthbound meets Red Dead Redemption. I was like, whoa. Go on. Let's see what you got. It's definitely more Earthbound than Red Dead. And I feel bad before I started because, Ben, you reached out to me about what we could talk about today on Frame Trap. And I was like, I did stream Boot Hill Bounties, and you can go back at youtube.com/EasyAlliesPlays and see my stream if you'd like to know more. I got totally stuck on a quest right when the stream ended. And I was like, well, there we go. There was just something, they were asking me to do something, and I thought I did it, but I couldn't finish it. But before I started, I was like, oh no, I hardly remember the real specifics of the battle system, and that's a mistake, especially for JRPG going into Frame Trap.
I always ask about the battle system, yeah.
I don't got a lot for you. The one thing that I did appreciate is it accounted lore-wise, because you're mostly fighting animals. At least you go through the beginning of this game. I'm sure later on I fight a bunch of cowboys and, hopefully like maybe some undead or something. I don't know. But there's just a lot of like squirrels and, evil foxes and stuff. And I didn't kill any of them. When the fights were all over, they said specifically, they scampered off. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's just kind of like a struggle for territory and not necessarily going out and just, like Red Dead where you actually like skin them and like peel the fur off.
That's something that's always so funny about Pokemon is it's like something gets blasted with a hyper beam and it's like, oh, no, I just fainted. It's not,
yeah,
it's not
nothing
evaporated. It's just, yeah.
But it definitely has an Earthbound vibe. The characters have big heads. The world is very 2D, but they do a lot of fun things with perspective. So you will kind of linearly like travel up to a higher place, and then once you're up on that cliff, you'll then see the town that you were in the background, and it has somewhat of a serious story. There was a struggle between Native American tribes that we kind of get embroiled in, and we do have one member of the tribe that's a part of your team. That when she joined, I was like, bow and arrows, yes, like let's do it. But it still is kind of tongue in cheek. It definitely plays to your expectations of a lot of things that you would expect from a Western, but in a good way. They do a good job just in the tutorial. Again, I just streamed it for 2 hours, so like just in that span of time, I got a full 4-person party.
Nice.
And was able to see the differences, and the way that one of the ways that you level up is hats are a big deal. So hats are like the closest that the game comes to classes, where you can kind of change up your style, like when you put on a brand new hat that you either unlock or you get from finishing a boss fight, or I'm sure later on in the game you can probably buy them. Not only obviously can you see that on your character, but that gives you a different skill set, and then when you get to a certain level, you just then can adopt those skills, and then if you put on a different hat, you can then bring those skills over. And so it was interesting, it specifically being hats, I thought, with the Western, that it's like, oh, okay, I got a Stetson on, and that like kind of indicates like how I'm going to fight. But it's funny, Ben. I'm actually curious. I'm not a huge fan of super involved combat systems in role-playing games. In terms of, I like it when I have the chance to really dig into specifics of how I want to fight something. So if I'm in a battle and I'm like, okay, this is difficult, I really need to look at the minutia of the system and really figure out what I'm doing wrong, or how I can buff up. Or if I'm paying attention to one fight, it takes a little bit longer. I'm not really a fan of battle systems where it's like every fight is hard. It's like every single time you get into a system, you gotta go through, you gotta build up and then do your big attacks. Otherwise, you're gonna struggle every single time.
I think it just comes down to structure, because I like it when, like, okay, well, if you're gonna make me fight a bunch of stuff, you can't have every fight take forever or have every fight be super complicated. But when you do swing for the fences and you have like a big boss fight, and you make it more complex, or you demand like a level of understanding with the systems, I appreciate that. Like, I hate in JRPGs when you're fighting bosses that are like just as easy as the trash that you've been fighting up into the boss. Like, there needs to be some sort of balance.
And one thing that, and it's interesting that I'm, with your Bravely Defaults and your Octopath Travelers, like slowly but surely I'm like branching out to learn like lots of other combat scenarios. And one thing that this game doesn't necessarily focus on too intently, but one thing that I enjoy, that I'm seeing pop up in a lot of other games, is just this kind of like stagger system, where it's like, once the type of enemy that you're going against, what type of moves you can do to kind of get them in a vulnerable position, and then you capitalize on that. And one thing that I'm not that familiar with that this game does, that I'm seeing also in other games, is obviously, if I'm playing something like, Jedi Fallen Order, like you have to learn how to telegraph those attacks. So when they're about to do something that's really intense, or you do better at the game when you know that. Whereas in turn-based games, especially stuff with like an active time battle system, I'm not used to stuff like that. It's usually just like, I just had enough health, or I have to react after the fact when stuff like that happens, and not necessarily like see that stuff in advance. Yeah. And you can see how much of your like ATB meter, I'll just call it, you need to spend to do some of the crazier attacks. But you can also see the enemies do that. So if you see an enemy not doing something for a while, and you can see that meter fill up, and you're like, uh-oh, like I can see they're about to do something crazy. So I need to either prep myself or have everybody go back. And that was interesting. That was it's definitely it's not my favorite type of battle system, but it's not necessarily what I would say is a bad thing, because knowing people like you, Ben, knowing people that eat battle systems for breakfast, and definitely want things, are curious to have systems that are very complex. It is definitely the thinking man's RPG battle system, where like you can't just mash through fights. You do kind of have to. I mean, you can, but I guess it just takes a lot longer. Like, you definitely have to play to strengths. and it is funny. It's really fun how they play with sprites, because everything is 2D, but sprites like bounce a lot, they bend a lot. Sometimes you'll hit an enemy so hard they'll just flip like in the background. Like you'll hit a squirrel with such a strong attack, just go like flying off into the trees.
I love that. I love that.
like a field goal. And so it it's tricky, because another thing that might have turned me off, again, not an attack on the game, but just something that's not necessarily my style. Watching Blood play through all of Earthbound, I really enjoyed having him do it, because I tend to kind of stumble through games like that have a comedic approach to quest completion, where it's like it's not really necessarily going to make sense what you're doing. You wouldn't necessarily think, yes, that's automatically the item that I would go to get. It's like that's kind of the point, kind of in like a Leisure Suit Larry Escape from Monkey Island, where it's like you didn't know the violin was the thing that was going to open the prison door, but like it does kind of have that backwards, puzzle solving, step-by-step process. And there is a lot of that absurdity to this game, where you're using items in ways that you didn't necessarily think you would, much like Earthbound. So I appreciate that. But for the time that I have to invest in a big game like that, which is why I think I might gravitate towards something like Xenoblade than this game.
Oh man, it's so funny, because I would say with RPGs I've gotten more methodical as I've gotten older with my playstyle, but it was real eye-opening playing Trials of Mana with Blood, where it's like, no, he's got this stuff like written down.
Yeah.
He was doing research the night before. Like he was definitely like way more methodical than I was approaching it, and I think he does that for a lot of games. Like he just is very much like, we're gonna do everything and then we're gonna move on. And I love seeing all of the different play styles of the allies kind of, I don't know, show itself in different ways. But
I've never full played through something with Blood. Yeah, that would be fascinating to see.
You should do it.
They made a joke, Brandon, on one of my streams, where they're like, oh, if you and Brandon did like Brandon plays Pokemon, you just grind forever. Like, it'd just be endless grinding. I think that's, like, even more true with Blood. It'd be really interesting to see you guys do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because playing, Pokemon with Kyle's the opposite.
Right,
Kyle's like,
right.
I don't know, what are we doing, Jones? I'm like, I don't remember, man.
Yeah.
I was doing other things this week.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't prepping for this stream. Like, you're the expert. But I really enjoyed it, and I think Boot Hill Bounties, it's a kind of, I would definitely look at a screenshot if you're curious about this. If you're a Western fan, I would look at, just how the world is presented, how the battle system's presented. Because it also carries over some of the Earthbound vibes just in the menus, just kind of like really fun fonts and just really silly, not necessarily silly, but just very whimsical, whimsical HUD, whimsical menus. Like everything fits the Western theme. And I think it's the kind of thing that you can just glance at and know, like, oh, that's definitely for me, or like, oh, it looks a little odd. Like that might not be your style. But it had a great pace for the first couple hours, and I love something that gives me RPGs that give me a party to love almost right away, and characters that definitely feel different, and it still kind of had serious vibes. They're definitely what you felt, the desperation of this world. Like you walk through a cemetery at one point. It had a very elaborate opening credit sequence, which I appreciate. And the world, it was not repetitive. It was not kind of like an early Final Fantasy game thing where they give you a town and then they're just like, all right, circle that town for an hour, to like get enough experience to then beat the boss to move on to something else. Like they definitely wanted you to see a lot of the world right away and let you know like what you were in between this town and that town, and you can't go up there yet, but that's what's up there. That's where she's from, and they introduce characters in the story before you meet them. So it definitely is a fun backstory to it. And it just came out of nowhere. Boot Hill Bounties is probably a game potentially everyone listening to this podcast has not heard of before. So it's fun to bring a game like that to light.
That's something that not just Final Fantasy games get right, but like old Squaresoft games that I wish, I don't know, because I hate playing an RPG and being like, listen, it's rough at the beginning, but you've got to, once you get there, it's good. I hate saying that. And that's something, looking at Final Fantasy, like just some amazing intros. I love whenever an RPG does that. Talking about the nice intro that Boot Hill Bounty has. Brandon, you've made me very interested in this game. I think it's up my alley, man. Brad, you're bringing something to Frame Trap that I am really excited to hear about. Just very curious as somebody who's like super outside of this world now, and that is the World of Warcraft Shadowlands Alpha.
Yeah, that's right. So I've been playing the Shadowlands Alpha.
Nice.
We all of us here have a history of World of Warcraft.
Yes.
A very long history, especially with it. I've been playing every expansion pretty much here and there. Pretty disappointed with the current expansion where it's at right now, just all its systems and whatnot. But Shadowlands is doing some things that I like that are quite different. So just to set up, Shadowlands takes place in the afterlife in the Warcraft universe. So there's like 4 areas, and each area is a different area you go to when you die. So like Uther from Warcraft 3 is gonna be in the game in a certain area. You'll see Uther, see a bunch of stuff like that. But there's one area that's kind of like what you think of like Greek or Roman afterlife with the wheat fields, kind of thing like that. But there's one really cool one that I know both of you will like, and it's vampires. It's pretty much Castlevania. It's gothic vampires. There's literally like vampires there. And there's the first raid for the game is going to be the castle.
Because an area that, Brad, it's so funny that you say that, because an area that I thought they did really, really well was like the Worgen starting area. I loved the vibe of the Worgen. And so I'd be really curious to see their take on vampires.
Yeah, they're really cool. So that zone specifically is somewhere you get sent if you're a bad boy. You go there and you have to like repent or like try to cleanse you of your sins and stuff like that. That's their whole thing. So I did like some of that zone. Their quest structure took some notes from Final Fantasy 14 in the sense of there's like side quests and there's like a main story quest. You could clearly see like, hey, this is the quest you're going to do to kind of go down the story path. But if you want to just still keep doing side quests, there's a bunch of that stuff there. Pretty good stuff so far. Some of the class changes are pretty good. I mean, it's an alpha right now, so stuff will change. But one of the most interesting aspects of the expansion coming out is this thing called Torghast. So Torghast is pretty much a roguelite, I don't know what the correct term for it is, system you can do. It's pretty much you take whatever class you want, any character you want. You can go in with other people too, up to 5, I think. But anyways, you go from floor to floor to floor to floor to floor with like random enemy placements and stuff like that. You go through there, there's upgrades you could get. You can collect to like increase your power and something like that. So it pretty much takes these roguelike elements you got from other games, but they just kind of threw into World of Warcraft. So there's like floors you go to, there's bosses, then you get like legendary rewards for it later on. I just did a little bit of it, but from what I did, it seemed pretty interesting. I don't know I don't know how many floors there will be, but I know I know people have done quite a few of them. But I thought it was an interesting concept you can kind of do by yourself if you want. I feel like a lot of MMOs are, especially WoW, is getting more content you can do by yourself, which is cool, I guess, but there's still the raid stuff. But it seemed like a nice little roguelike system to the game. It felt like something I could just do. I could do a run. I could hop on for 20 minutes if I wanted and just do a run and see how I got. I don't have to spend 3 hours trying to find a group for this thing. So yeah, I walked away with that pretty impressed with it. So yeah, I think Shadowlands is looking pretty good right now. I mean, things could definitely change. There's like not a lot of the zones aren't even in the game yet. I haven't gotten to mess with them. But from what the game is at Battle for Azeroth, I feel better about it than I did with that.
It's been quite a while since I was playing WoW actively. And so this might be like an outdated complaint, but I think the thing that I eventually got to with WoW that was frustrating is it just felt like I was babysitting a bunch of stuff where it's like I gotta wait for this timer on this thing and then
the mission tables.
Yeah, there were just all these things where I felt like it was kind of a slog logging in, and like the activities that I was doing, I felt like I was doing them purely out of a sense of obligation rather than like a sense of excitement. And so I guess if this kind of roguelike thing that you're describing, if that's like fun and has like a sense of danger to it, I think that would be a cool
there's definitely a sense of danger from what I've seen. They've made a few other changes too, which I'm very happy with. So the level cap in the game right now is 120, but in the expansion they're dropping the level cap back down to 60. So if you're hopping into this game, it's not going to feel like it's such a daunting task. there's also a new. So when you make a new character now, if it's your first time playing, you go to a new specific starting zone that kind of it teaches you the ropes of the game, how the game works very well. Actually, like, hey, this is where your mount's gonna be. This is what a quest thing is like, and it takes you through like a tiny storyline and ends kind of at like a dungeon. Like you'll queue up for it, but you can do it with like the computer. But it serves like a nice training wheels to get into the game, because when people play this game for the first time currently right now, like some of that content feels really old. Yeah. Like if you're playing the game, you're like, oh, I'm gonna make a blood elf, and you play as a blood elf, like you're playing content from like 2006 or something like that, where it's just like, dude, this feels old.
Amazing at the time.
Yeah, at the time, but it's like, man, it's been a long time, so I think that was a smart idea to kind of clean up the leveling.
Brad, so I'm just kind of contrasting this with because I've kind of paused it due to Xenoblade, but before Xenoblade, I was really getting into Final Fantasy XIV again, which was really nice. And I think a huge driving force was I was actually getting pretty invested in the story of Stormblood, and I was like, this is well presented. I care about it. I want to see where this goes. I think the voice acting is good. And with WoW, like, I feel like it's been a really long time since I've cared about the story of WoW. Like, it's gotten so crazy that I'm just like, whatever, man. Is Shadowlands showing you anything where it's like, oh, I like this is cool, or I want to see how this resolves?
I mean, yeah, I definitely I was curious about storylines when I was in the zones specifically. I didn't finish any of them, and like a lot of stuff's still missing. Like voice acting's missing from a lot of stuff. Like a lot of the cutscenes, there's a big red X that says "cutscene not final" kind of stuff. So a lot of like the things that'll help it are missing. But I was definitely interested to see like what was going on. Like that vampire zone, there's like a rebellion going on, and you got two kind of like factions fighting over stuff. So you go with one side and you investigate the other side. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of into what's going on with this story.
Whenever I dip back into WoW, something that I'm always like super impressed by is like how the zones look. Just artistically, I think they do such a good job.
Oh yeah, I mean Blizzard's art team is always real good.
And you feel like that is carrying forward in Shadowlands.
Yeah. Cool. Oh yeah.
And that makes me really excited to check out that like vampire area then. Brandon.
Yeah.
Do you feel any longing for WoW, or are you like, I had my time, I'm good?
I have a longing for that time.
Sure.
I have a longing for those days. Like I definitely, I never had any animosity for WoW because I got to clean out. It was like during Cataclysm that like right before that next expansion happened. I was like, okay, I'm done. And it was really, for me, WoW was less about the game and more about the people that I played with. And whereas the way the Final Fantasy XIV was structured, it was the similar friend group that I was playing with, but like you're saying with the story, like there was a lot more going on in that world, and even just my love for Final Fantasy, like the desire to have more of an understanding about this one entry. It'd be a bummer to be in, like at Final Fantasy 24 or whatever, and like look back to 14 and be like, yeah, that was a blind spot. I never really got into those expansions. Even some of the stuff that happened later with 11, after I'd stopped playing 11, it was a bummer that like I never really got into those high level raids. It's interesting, Brad, because the pick a class, go through this kind of tower setup. There was a thing we played with Damiani in 14, right?
So yeah, that's the same
kind
deep
of thing.
dungeon. Yeah. It's kind of similar. Things
and that was
work differently.
Great.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but it works a little different.
And that's really smart. I think that's like, because back in the day when I was playing, 14 a lot and was playing World of Warcraft a lot, I was like, MMOs are the best. It's the best genre in all of video gaming. I can't wait to see the future of MMOs. And the future of MMOs was MOBAs, and then the future of MMOs was Battle Royale. And it just moved away to other things in terms of like these big, like multi-million player, enterprises that people are going to try to set up. And I think having things like that are less focused on dailies, that are less focused on huge story investment, and I wonder even potentially could be like free to play. That like if you have people that are so dedicated to the game, and then you have this one mode that it's like you can bring your friends into this, and then they can just pick whatever class, whatever level, it doesn't matter. They're still helping with you. You can play with you, but if then they're like, oh, that raid looks like fun, you're like, well, no. If you want to do that, then you got to do the cutscenes. You got to get into the story. So that attracts me. That's really neat. Just that kind of, something I can jump in and especially trying out other classes is really fun. Whether I'm interested in investing in them more in the future or whether it's just like, I kind of always wanted to play a priest,
it's not like you hop in there and you could pick any character. Like, it's your character you've been using. Mm-hmm. So you have, like, maybe you'll be like, oh man, I want a level character just for this though.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think some of those things can open doors into other parts of the game that you would just be averse to, that you might be like, oh, well, I'll try it out.
I'm not like a brand new player to WoW, right? I've put a ton of time into WoW, but something that I always appreciate is like, usually as a returning player, it's always pretty easy to get back into the swing of things.
Yeah, WoW's pretty easy to get back in.
Like, I feel like they kind of structure expansions in a way where there's like a really good opening like funnel system that kind of gets you your feet wet, and it's something I think they always do a pretty good job of. I'd be curious to like, and that's a good show idea, to like get somebody who's never played an MMO before, and it's like, we're gonna pay to boost you to the max and throw you in, and let's see what happens. I don't know. Be fun.
It would take a lot for me to play World of Warcraft again, but Huber has tried many times. But yeah, I'd say about 350. But one thing that MMOs do that Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft did for me that just no game does, it's just a feeling that a satisfaction that I get, and it's pure Huber, like towns, campfires kind of jolly vibe. Just logging in to an MMO and just going into the world at first, just first breath of like, oh, I'm here, I made it, I'm in the Matrix. I've just I've really stepped into this world that's living and breathing, and seeing other players run around and going to hubs and seeing people traveling to go do different things. There's just no other gaming experiences I have right now, even like really feeling immersed in a Red Dead 2 when I play online, or Mafia 2 when I'm running through this campaign. It's just a different vibe and like a living, breathing player base that's going about and doing their stuff. I miss that.
That's what World of Warcraft did so well, man. Like, think about. I mean, you're an Alliance player, Brandon, so it would be like,
was rather. I'm always down to change stuff out.
But like, just playing on the Horde side, and you had a similar experience on the Alliance side going into Stormwind. But I just remember like having like your small little starting zone, and then working up and getting into Orgrimmar, and how like truly epic Orgrimmar felt, and just like seeing like people that were way beyond you, and just all the activity that was happening, like that was magical. Yeah, more stuff like that.
Fun, yeah.
But I don't know. I always feel weird saying that stuff, because it's like, well, I was playing World of Warcraft in high school, and it was like a pop culture phenomenon. Like, it's just nostalgia. I don't know. I second guess.
I think it's cool going to any MMO and seeing people who are like way higher level than you. And you're like, whoa, look at all this stuff.
Yeah, you're right about that for sure.
I remember one big thing for me, Ben, in Final Fantasy XI was Juneau was like the big central city, and then everybody started the three. There were three other starting towns, and I started in, we called it Baystoke, but I guess it's Bastock.
Yeah.
I was but when I learned that, but I started there, and when we finally got, I think at like level 20 or something, I finally got a chocobo, and so it was a thing where it's like, okay, now you have to go to Juneau to continue the rest of the story, and that trip to Juneau
was brutal.
Probably took, it was dangerous, and that's something I think MMOs have lost a little bit of. Like, usually a lot of that danger is off the beaten path, whereas like in 11, like something can AoE you off of your mount and you're toast. I mean, like you might de-level, like it's really scary. I just remember that journey to Juneau was like an event. Like I like got home from work being like, here we go, and like all I'm doing is riding around on a chocobo, but like it really felt like I was traveling somewhere very far away. And I miss that.
MMOs are afraid
it
of
takes
the danger
a lot.
now. It's annoying. Yeah.
I play so many open world games. It takes a lot for an open world game to feel big, especially if you play something like Spider-Man, where you can just zip to the other end of the city in 2 seconds. It's nice to have something feel that expansive and dangerous.
At the top of the show, we talked about like, quarantine opening up space to just randomly do things. I randomly played through Silent Hill 4.
Cool. I always wanted to finish it.
Yeah. So I had played it before, and I hadn't finished it, and so it was like a good excuse to just go through and finish it. Because I always loved the premise and like the first person perspective and the vibes of 4. Like there was so much that I loved about 4, but I just didn't finish it. And what a fascinating game that I really like a lot, and also annoyed the shit out of me. Like I can't. It's one of those games where I think I like the good stuff so much that I wish I could just kind of handwave the bad stuff. But it's definitely a game that feels like it's fighting itself a lot. I actually do think the story is great. I think the guy that you play as, Henry, is awful and about as interesting as a piece of cardboard. Like he really brings nothing to the table, and like doesn't seem to have the investment that like a Heather or James does in the story. Which is really annoying. But outside of that, Silent Hill 4 is about a serial killer. And something that it does really, really well is it uses the environment and like the notes that you're getting to understand the psyche of this serial killer. And like the enemies play into it, and the other characters that you interact with play into it. And so by the time that you actually unravel this thing, like you feel like you have a really good understanding of where this person is coming from. And like, yeah, he's still a crazy psychopath, but you're like, I get it. I get why this happened to you. And I love that. I love when games can kind of use all the tools that they have to really flesh out somebody. I think that's something that Silent Hill 4 does really, really well. And dude, holy shit, I want a new Silent Hill so bad because the audio design and the environment design is impeccable, and still like I was playing this on a PS2, still just like unnervingly gross. The way that they use sounds and just have like random things pop up, or like the hauntings in your apartment, or just like the disgusting sounds the enemies would make. Like it doesn't do a lot of like boo gotcha, that's not what Silent Hill is known for, but you just kind of feel bad as you're going through these really decrepit places, and it's awesome. Just a very like unsettling is really the word for it. Brandon, you mentioned you played Silent Hill 4.
Yeah.
Before I get into like the stuff that I think is fighting itself, what was kind of your big takeaway from it? And what is your history of Silent Hill, I guess? I don't know that.
I have never finished a Silent Hill game. I've loved them all from afar. I never really got into 3 for some reason, but I played really 1 with friends. 1 was like a huge deal at the time, and I think it was the kind of game I kept like starting over again and would just kind of explore. But like, it was so fascinating, that jump to 3D with PS1 and 64, that like I think that was one of those generations where I just like, tried everything. I was just like, experimenting with so many different genres. And then 2, it really frustrates Ian that like I was like, oh, this is so great. They mark all the doors that I check that like, no, that door, you can't open that yet, or you need the key for this. And I still just like completely got stuck in 2. I was just like, I don't know what to do. I thought I've tried everything. I just don't know like how to move forward. And it just felt like the kind of game you kind of slowly want to peel the paint off of, and not something where it's like, I want to check a guide now. That would just kill it for me. And so I ended up not finishing that. Whereas like I finished every single Resident Evil game, anything more action focused,
Sure.
I didn't have the same issues with. My memories of 4 though was a lot of Hitchcock vibes. I remember like looking out that window at the street, and like looking across the street like in other windows, and you'd see somebody like in another apartment staring at you, and like just a lot of that stuff. That's the stuff that really gets me in horror cinema as well. Like I tend not to really get swept away by big monster designs, and I hate it when like music like tells me to be scared. It's like, all right, I just hate like kind of being shoved in a direction. Like I love it when I think there's a tremendous payoff in games and in horror cinema when something can take a risk at being dull or boring and just kind of slowly erode at your psyche, and then you get to a point where like, wow, I'm being affected by this and nothing's really happening. And I the room kind of did that. It just kind of felt like I was playing a Hitchcock movie where I would go back into the apartment after leaving, and then something would be slightly different, or there would something just would be a little off, and you couldn't really specifically see what that was. And so I really liked, I think it was the same dumb Silent Hill thing where I just got stuck. I just like there's some puzzle I couldn't figure out, and I wasn't playing with anybody else, and just kind of moved on to something else.
Man, the way Silent Hill 4 plays with space is pretty fascinating, because you start the game and you figure out that you're in this like horrible situation where you cannot leave your apartment, you can't get out, you're stuck, and no one can help you. You're just completely isolated in this room. And that sucks. That's terrifying. But then you go into this hole in your bathroom and you're like, there are places that I'm going to that are way worse than this apartment, than this room. Like, being stuck in my room kind of feels okay. And they kind of like have mechanics that condition you to feel that way. So the room is where you go to save, and in the first half of the game, that's where you're recovering health. And so it kind of becomes like this small little sanctuary. And then they flip that on its head halfway through the game. You go there and you have things that, like, if you don't, these hauntings, like if you don't clear them and you just kind of stay in them, they'll kill you and you don't recover health anymore. And so I love that it takes this place of safety and flips it on its head and turns it against you. But I feel like Silent Hill 4 has so many good ideas, but it maybe just does too many of them. Like, so you have that mechanic with the room and the hauntings. Cool idea. But then you have these unkillable enemies, these ghosts. You cannot kill them. You can find these swords that will pin them down, but there aren't that many of them, and they're just really annoying, and they'll chase after you. But then the entire second half of the game is an escort quest where you have to...
Oh, no. The entire second half.
She can't die, but she, takes psychological damage, and you'll get a bad ending if she takes too much damage, and you have, no control of her whatsoever, and she's slow, and you'll run into the situation where you're like, oh, I went through the door, and she didn't follow me, so now I gotta, go through the door and get her again. Again, I think the idea is, kind of interesting, where you actually end up going through a bunch of areas twice, and it's like, okay, I'm taking this person with me, I have to protect them, I have to look out for them. I kind of like that idea, right? Because Silent Hill is always very much about going through these places alone and not understanding what's happening outside of rare interactions with characters. There's a lot of isolation in Silent Hill, and so bringing somebody else along is good, but it's just too much to deal with, where it's I got to deal with Eileen, and she's a pain in the ass, and I have to deal with these unkillable ghosts, and I'm going through all these areas again in the second time. It's just it's just too much. I think you could pull one of those things out, just mechanically. Narratively, the ghosts serve a super strong narrative purpose. There's a reason why they're there and why they're messing with you, but I think just mechanically and gameplay wise, the annoyance starts to outweigh the fun. And I always hate that in horror games where you're I want to be scared, but right now I'm too annoyed to really immerse myself in the horror. But I don't know, man, even when it's bad, it's good. It's a game that really goes for it. And I can criticize it all day long, but I still I walked away being that was awesome. It's a game I'm glad I didn't have to review. I think that review, speaking of a game really fighting itself, I think that review would really fight itself a lot, for sure.
That's what's so tricky about horror is you're essentially pissing off the player intentionally.
Sure.
You're trying to put them, you're constantly taking power away from them. You're constantly putting them up against, things that they could potentially seem unbeatable.
Right.
And it's, it's a risk reward. I can't imagine balancing something like a Resident Evil game and being how much ammo should I give them? Mm-hmm. Just maybe even just running a bunch of people through it and then asking them, okay, when did you run out? And, So yeah, I have a lot of respect for people that can kind of find that. That's where that's the issue I ran into in Alien Isolation. That like Huber always just fumes whenever I like bring it up. Where I just like I'm like I just feel like a maintenance worker, and he's like, well, you are, and I'm like, I know, and I feel like one. It's like it just felt so I was doing a job,
right.
And not necessarily because that making that work for a multi-hour experience is very difficult. So.
I'm glad you brought up inventory management, though, because it's another thing you have to deal with in Silent Hill 4 The Room. I don't know why I'm saying the full title. Silent Hill 4. In Silent Hill 4, you...
Available on PlayStation 2.
Yeah, available on PlayStation. Review copy provided by PlayStation. In Silent Hill 4, you have to deal with inventory management, and that wasn't really a concern in past Silent Hill games. You just kind of picked up stuff, if I remember correctly. But in Silent Hill 4, you definitely have to really worry about inventory. And... you have an item box, but you have to go back to your room to go to the item box. And so there are only specific points within any given level where you can go back to the room. And again, cool idea. I like the stress of figuring out what to pick up. But again, it's just like, okay, I got to deal with this limited inventory and this AI character and these unkillable enemies. And it's just like, there's so much... and I think that's something about Resident Evil. Like, I really love inventory management in Resident Evil. I love it so much. And I think when it's done well and you have to decide, like, should I bring this herb with me or not? Or do I really need this ammo? I think that's what makes survival horror interesting. And it's a bummer to me that a lot of the genre has kind of moved away from that and kind of lessened that burden. Because I think when it's done well, it is super satisfying to make those decisions. But yeah. I don't know, because Brandon, you like Resident Evil, and you mentioned like more of an action focus, but some of your favorite ones are Resident Evil 4, right, where you're doing the Tetris management, and Resident Evil Remake, where you have very intense inventory space, especially if you're playing as Chris. So like you have to like that on some level.
Well, you RE0's like what a lot of fans consider to be the worst of that, and I don't feel that as much. Not because it's not a problem, but because at the time I got what they were trying to do.
Oh, I get what they're trying to do.
I was like, okay, you're making new Resident Evil games. You want to change them up, and obviously not every game can be as revolutionary as of a change as 4. But I, because even like in my teens playing like the first couple Resident Evils, I was like, oh, there's a new item box. Well, I'll move stuff, and then I open them up, and I'm like, oh, it's the same objects. Oh, well, that doesn't make sense, but I appreciate it. That like that first aid spray would have traveled magically, miles to my next location where I'm at right now. So from a realistic standpoint, I appreciate that that's what they were going for, but. Yeah, again, it's just all about that constraint. It's all about, which is, where I struggle sometimes with games because something like a Resident Evil, something like a Red Dead 2, where a lot of people were frustrated with the controls and just kind of like, I got to go through all these steps to get this item. I clean my gun and all that stuff. Like here I am on the other side of it, like this is great, because it grounds me more with the objects and I appreciate it more. I have more of a connection with these things, and so I just don't think you're going to please everybody with that stuff. And so it's interesting, Ben, with the horror genre where it has kind of splintered off into either kind of like first person thrillers and kind of low budge independent like side scrolly kind of puzzly stuff where this inventory management third person slight action Silent Hill style is not as prevalent. Not a lot of people are attempting that.
I think Just if anything, the number one thing that I miss from Silent Hill and why I wanted to come back is it just feels so thoughtful. Like, you can definitely like rail against the voice acting and how cheesy some of that stuff is, but if you look at the underlying story and the things that they're trying to explore, you really walk away with something like, oh, this game had something to say. Like, it wasn't just like, boo, haha, gotcha, made you jump. That is not at all what it's going for, and I think horror just allows you to explore a space that most video games don't even try. And so, you kind of only get that here, and that's what I miss from Silent Hill. But Ben, Resident Evil 0, because you brought it up, I also played through that recently. And like, the reason it's bad is because like the inventory management in Resident Evil inherently is like okay, I have to worry about the space and I might have to make a trip to the item box to go get this stuff. Resident Evil 0 doesn't really streamline anything. Like, not only do you have to deal with kind of like the normal Resident Evil inventory management, it just makes it more cumbersome, where it's like, you're going to have to pick up all of these puzzle pieces that you're like, you need to solve this puzzle and you need like all of these things, or it's like, oh, only Rebecca can do this. So you have to like spend time not only going and getting the things that you need, but also constantly switching stuff back and forth. And it's like, you're not really showing me the joys of having to manage inventory between two people. I'm just spending more time in the menus. Like, the reason why you have limited inventory is not so you're constantly fiddling around. It's so you feel the tension. So you're like, you maybe regret a decision. And Resident Evil 0, it's like, I don't regret things more. I just am literally staring at the menu more often. Like, you just made me do twice as much work for, like, no payoff. It's really weird.
Yeah. If you don't know what you're doing, it'll be frustrating and repetitive. If you do know what you're doing, it'll just seem like busy work.
Yes.
There's no sweet spot.
Right, yeah.
Like there's no middle point where you're like, oh, I did bring the right items. Yes. Yeah. It's never rewarding in the way. Yeah. I think it's different for different sake. I think somebody brought that up at a meeting and everyone was like, oh, what if it was one item box? Yeah. And then they just never really made that fun, made it worth it.
Well, there are no item boxes. You just leave stuff on the ground.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It's been so long. I remember the story being interesting. I remember when we did the big timeline episode of the Retro. I remember it was the characters they introduced and some of the holes they filled in. Just in a great way, like the old Spencer Mansion backstory, just this like really tragic, anything to make Umbrella more evil or to make these people, just to see kind of like not only these horrible things that are happening in the world, but like all the stuff that could have been prevented leading up to them. Yeah.
I think there was stuff that I liked with the story and then other things that I was like, whatever. But I don't know. I think I'm just a sucker, man, for third-person survival horror. I think I am. Like, I want more of it. Brad, I know you're a big Resident Evil fan, and like you really got sucked into like 2 and 3 remake, and then you were playing the RE1 remake and all that stuff, and like you've been going really hard on Resident Evil. Do you have any like strong fondness for Silent Hill?
So the only Silent Hill I beat was 2, but I remember being very good. I've played some of 1, but I never played 3 or 4, and like I fell off after that. Sure. But yeah, I do remember liking 2 quite a bit.
That's why I want it to come back. I want it to be like this resurgence and like make old fans happy, get new people on board, and all this stuff. So.
Like I always liked Resident Evil much more than Silent Hill, but I appreciated what Silent Hill was doing.
Yeah. It always, when they were both at their prime, it felt like a good yin and yang. Yeah. And I miss that. I miss that balance, for sure.
Because, like, if you just look at them and you're not familiar with sound horror or survival horror, you'd be like, oh, yeah, they're probably just, like, the same type of game, but they're, like, pretty damn different.
Yep. Please come back. I know there are rumors floating out there of things happening with Silent Hill, and those Resident Evil rumors sound really good, but what sounds good right now is HOTTAKE! Man, I came up with a bunch of ideas for HOTTAKE. There wasn't like one that was really calling out to me, so hopefully this will generate some good conversation. But the HOTTAKE today, so Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, and the reason why I'm saying the whole thing there is the Definitive Edition, we've got Mafia Definitive Edition, we've got all these Definitive Editions and re-releases, they're constant, and I know we've kind of touched on this before in Frame Trap, but Xenoblade brought it into my mind once again, where I'm like, why buy anything at launch? Like, Xenoblade's kind of a weird case, right, where it came out so long ago that... and it does so much. But what I mean is, between early access, definitive editions, Game of the Year editions, season passes, things going on Game Pass, or PlayStation Plus, like, why buy anything at launch? Are we being strongly disincentivized from buying things at launch when we could just wait and have a fuller experience?
I mean, to me, it just depends how bad you want to play it.
Sure.
Kind of thing.
But
it's like, I don't want to wait. I just want to play it.
Right, but is there any like seed of doubt in your mind where it's like, oh, I really want to play it? Well, maybe I'll wait for it to be like the best version it could be.
Some games maybe. Like, I don't really play early access games because I usually like to wait till it's out.
Sure.
But like, I don't know. Like a lot of the games, if there's a game like that where if I would wait for the Game of the Year edition, I wouldn't buy that game at launch because I wasn't super excited enough about it.
One interesting experience that I'm having right now, Ben, is I have no regrets over playing Control when it came out. That was my Game of the Year last year. Like, I absolutely loved that. And then now there's this story DLC that just came out, and I'm like, I'm okay. I don't know why. Like, this is my goatee, you know? Like, I loved this game, and like, it's not enough to pull me back. Maybe that's just kind of how the story ended, or I don't necessarily need to have those questions answered, but it's definitely the kind of thing that if I'd waited until now, I'd probably be much more interested in doing all of it. You know, I would move right from finishing the campaign into that extra content, whereas going back after the fact, that's like when I think people really won if they'd waited to play Horizon Zero Dawn, because they only had one big DLC thing, and it just kind of neatly just plops right into like the 60-yard line of the story, and so you might not even notice that it's extra stuff. It's just a bigger game,
right, if you
go at it later. And I mean, there's so much to play. I don't know if that's necessarily like a bad problem to have, like being like, oh, I'll delay that. But another thing as well is I remember this last gen when it started, I started Black Flag on 360 and then stopped and started a brand new campaign on Xbox One and was like, okay, yeah, this is clearly the way I should be playing this. So I wonder if like I'm going to have the same situation with Valhalla or anything that like will release on current gen consoles like 2 months before we know we're getting PS5 and Xbox Series X, and it's like, I'll wait, you know, because why not play that on a more powerful system?
Yeah.
Ben, to bring up for like an example of some reason maybe that I think waiting or like buying something right away is not a bad idea sometimes, is I think about if I played The Witcher 3 after all the DLC was out and everything, it's like, man, I don't know if I could play that much all at one time, because that's so much stuff.
Totally.
Where I might get burnt out. Like, I wouldn't want to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey and the DLCs all back to back.
Sure.
Like, that would be too much for me.
Yeah.
But if it comes out later, it could feel nice. Could be like, oh yeah, man, just come back for a quick little bit. Doesn't feel like a huge burden. Like you've had a break from the game, you know?
Right.
So when you come back, it feels a little more fresh.
I think part of the reason why I bring up the question is I think there's a hunger in the audience right now for things to get re-released, to get ported, to get remakes, and I totally understand that. But I feel like the last 2 generations, this has kind of been going on, and like going into the next generation where it's like, I don't know. I think I would like to see the consumer valued a little bit more. Like sometimes I think these things come out and it's like, yeah, you added new stuff, but like this is too much money. Like, or
sure.
I guess find creative ways of rewarding your audience where it's like, and people do that. It's not like it's not existent. There, a lot of developers for both single player, you know, and games as a service games and like multiplayer games do find ways to reward long-time players. But I guess, I don't know. I would like to see that more often. I think there's just like this weirdiness that I have going into the next generation where it's like, how many more re-releases am I going to see? Like, am I going to regret buying this PS4 game now when I could have just waited and played it on PS5? I don't know. It's not a concrete example. I think it's just a general feeling.
I feel like you can get that though with almost everything, man.
Sure.
Where it's just kind of like, man, I wish I didn't see this movie in the movie theater and I just waited for it at home and I could get it for way cheaper or something like that.
Right.
It's always going to be like a decision you're going to have to make to get something earlier.
Right. You mentioned like the Witcher 3 being like so much, and you're not sure that you would want to play all of that at once. And I think like Xenoblade is really interesting because that game is massive, and it's like I'm going through it again, and it's like would I have enjoyed this even more if I had just waited for this definitive edition? But at the same time, to play devil's advocate, I love these re-releases as an excuse to play games again, because I probably wouldn't have played Xenoblade again were it not for this. I probably wouldn't have played Persona 5 again were it not for this. And so I think on that side there is a huge benefit to it, and it's nice like having those things be part of the conversation again, because games move so fast that I do think these re-releases kind of bring things up in a cool way. Like, probably wouldn't be talking about Wonderful 101 had this re-release. Not that we're talking about it on the show, but I'm just saying, in general, in the culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's just great that you can play a lot of these games now just on a current hardware or something like that. Like, I've been playing Wind Waker HD on stream, and it's like, I love that game, but man, I really don't like the Wii U hardware.
Right.
I wish it was just on Switch or something like that. And it gives the game a nice second chance, I feel like, for a lot of people who didn't have the systems before. Like, a ton of people didn't have Wii U, so that's why there's so many of those games on Switch now.
Well, it's like Yakuza's the best case scenario
right.
you could possibly imagine for a series that big, for as many games from that series to come back in the ways that they have. And it's interesting to see the investment made in the earlier games now making it easier for the newer games that are coming out. Like I wonder at what point in all of the the Kiwami and a lot of this stuff being brought to the US that wasn't available before Judgment happened, where they decided like this is now become big enough that we can, not only, make another side story in this world, but also sell that almost immediately to an American audience. And we know they'll be interested in it and it'll do well. It's just kind of like it's a level of treatment that I imagine a lot of people would love to have applied to, their franchise of choice that has just kind of fallen off.
I do think it has kind of created this weird situation where like sometimes I'll think about playing a game that isn't available on a current generation thing or PC or whatever, and I'm like, I bet it'll get remade, like I should just wait. And I do feel like it has kind of created this interesting sense of doubt. But I also feel bad, like as somebody who's recommending games, right, and hyping games up on Frame Trap or streams or whatever, sometimes I'm like, maybe I should just tell people to wait. Like this could be way better in a year, or you could get it for free in a year. Like Civilization 6 is free right now on the Epic Games Store, and it's like, well, if you're not already invested in the series, this is a super easy way for you to get in. So just something to fish
and I think there's some Assassin's Creed is just a great example. There's some franchises like that like you just know there's going to be so much bloat at the end, and it could be really good and really interesting, and but it's just like it's probably not a bad thing to wait. When Spider-Man 2 comes out on PS5, like, it might be okay to wait, because if they handle DLC the same way they did on the PS4, it's just 3 chapters. They have a very specific story arc. It kind of picks up the difficulty level of where the game left off and pushes it a little bit further. And if you were to, for those that did wait and then picked up Spider-Man on PS4 after all that DLC was out, I think that's a wonderful amount of time to spend with a game.
Right.
And then you're done. Like, when that story's finished, you don't get a sense of like, where'd that character go, or that one thing. Whereas Witcher might be a little too much. Odyssey might be a little too much to kind of stomach, to put all the games aside and just dive into that.
Right.
But I think some other single player focused games are just kind of notorious. Even if it's not in a franchise, a company like Ubisoft, you kind of know, you can kind of expect what Watch Dogs Legion's, how that's going to go. Like the stuff they're going to add later. It's like you're not missing out a lot. But Mass Effect is totally that for me. Like, I will not touch Mass Effect on last gen consoles, because like I know that remaster is going to be, or likely enough that I'm just waiting for it.
And that'll be you'll be going through that for the first time, right?
Oh yeah,
dude.
I played Mass Effect 1 for like 2 hours.
Oh, whoa! I didn't know you never played Mass Effect.
Brandon, that is going to be like magical for you, man.
Mm-hmm. My expectations will be set for number 3. They'll be
I never even played 3, man.
Got it. I know it. I know where we're going.
I brought this up in the disaster report video, but that game really made me think, like, it's such a bummer. Like, if you go back to the PS2 era, there were so many things that you could unlock and like just earn through playing the game, and so much of that stuff is gated behind like pre-order bonuses or collector's edition bonuses or DLC. And I think that's kind of what I mean by like rewarding your audience and rewarding those people that are the most invested. And I want to see more of that. It's just like sometimes it just feels like you can just like buy your way to all the cool stuff. And I think like outside of experience and leveling up, I think I want to see people who really go the extra mile get insane rewards or just that dedication. It's just, I don't know. I think especially as
100% for that.
Like Silent Hill is great at that, right? Like the goofy endings that you can chase after or the outfits that you can unlock.
Like I loved in the Resident Evil games, like you get the rocket launcher for beating the game on hard or something like that, or beating under a certain amount of time, like rewarding people who putting in the time with something.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's what makes on one hand, I can see something like Mafia 2 and all the issues, you know, that Huber and other people are having, and I'm like, oh, you know, it's the first time I've ever played it, and it does look a little bit better, and it's on the console that is currently plugged into my TV, so there's a lot of convenience here, and like, I'm not too upset about it, but at the same time, if you're a huge fan, I can imagine that's really frustrating, because you get the feeling, we're not going to get this chance again. This is it. This is the only time this game's going to be remastered.
Right.
You know, this is not like Shadow of the Colossus where we're going to get like a remaster and then a remake. You know, like we have two different, you know, more pretty versions to play than the original PS2 version. And so sometimes it can kind of feel that's in a tangent. I will fully accept this is a huge tangent, but that's how upset I get sometimes when a musical will be made into a film, because there are a lot of musicals that I love that it would be a big ask to like drag a friend of mine to Hollywood to go see some weird production that I've never seen. It's like, I don't know if this is going to be good or not. When something gets like a big budget treatment and I go see Les Mis in the theater, I'm like, all right, here we go. And then I see it and I'm like, no, you know, people are like, cool, that's Les Mis. That's the thing you were talking about. It's like, it's not you. Oh man. Like you need to see this in its prime. Right. Like you need to see this where every role is sung really well and it's not abridged and they didn't cut that one song. Shit. You know, and it's a bummer because I know like they're not gonna do Les Mis again. That's it. You know, that's that crappy Johnny Depp Sweeney Todd. That's it. That's your Sweeney Todd. You know, it's like enjoy it while you can. And it's like, damn it, it's such a good show, and it's such a bummer that's in people's impressions of it forever. You know, like.
I mean, you bring up such a good point that is a whole nother element to this discussion is if it's more accessible but worse than the original version. Is it still worth recommending to people? Where like, you know, people are saying like this Mafia 2 is messed up, but you're having a great time. You're getting invested in the story and characters. And so like, where do you draw the line for people on like, I think that's the other thing that's so frustrating about video games is just because something gets a remake or a remaster doesn't mean it's like, definitive. It doesn't mean like it's the only version that should exist. Like Twin Snakes is really, really interesting, but I would never want it to completely take away, like playing the original MGS1 is a very different experience. And I love like what the PS3 and the PSP did and the Wii Virtual Console for that matter. And like they must not make them enough money, but going through like the PSN store and seeing all of these PS1 games that you can just download to your system in their original form or on your PSP or the Wii Virtual Console, like that is so awesome and makes me happy to invest in a next generation. And I think that's just so much more satisfying and like comfort boosting than like a remake or a remaster and you have no idea how good the quality is going to be. And so sometimes I wish both options were available.
You know, it's like really satisfying. That's so simple, but playing an old gen game on a new console that's just like, it's not barely in a port. Like they just like brought it to this new system. SSX3 I played on the Xbox One.
Nice.
And there are no load times. None. But like there's still the load screen.
Yeah, it's just like boop.
And it's so fun to just see it loading gone.
That's awesome.
Like it's so to me that's like strangely as satisfying, if not more, than like updated textures or greater draw distance or something. Just having this, it's kind of like what we're all kind of waiting to hear about this next gen, or seeing it really proven that like a lot of these people are like, oh yeah, it's a thing of the past, load times. It's like that does sound neat, but will we really notice it when we're just so kind of immersed in all these new worlds, or when you go back and play an old game and just see it run so much better in that way? There's another game too, another open world game that I played that was just like, oh, like I would fast travel somewhere and bam, I'm there. That was very satisfying.
Are we ready for some emails?
Yeah.
Are you ready for some emails?
You know, actually, before we move on to emails, I want to get your take on something where I kind of run into this problem with Frame Trap where, like, I only want to do a HOTTAKE if I'm interested in it, and I think the panel would be interested in it. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the 107th episode of the show, and sometimes I'm like, well, being passionate about it means like the same sorts of conversations will come up sometimes, and then I think to myself, well, it's okay if it repeats, as long as it's still an issue or there's still something to say. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think? Because I want to keep things fresh.
Yeah,
but
I think it's
fine.
I
don't know.
Yeah, I totally think you can bring up because you have different panelists and
right.
Yeah.
And being the moderator of the podcast now, it's funny actually when a topic will come up and I'm like, it doesn't really fit that podcast, and then somebody in chat or Blood will be like, oh yeah, Ben covered that in Frame Trap. I'm like, nice.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Because I think again, this is the place for these kind of long form discussions, and things can kind of go off the rails a little bit.
Right.
I brought up musicals for Christ's sakes, but like
your musical point is very relevant.
I think you can totally go back because stories change too. Like
right.
we might feel a different way about something, a week or two later. And I definitely think it's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely stolen topics from you. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
On things.
Snagged.
That is it's a blessing and a curse because there are times because Frame Trap always records after the podcast, and I'll like ask Blood or somebody, and I'm like, did they talk about it in the podcast? It'd be like, yes. I'll be like, oh damn it, okay, got to find something else, but forces you to try to be creative. Yeah. Our first email comes in from Mirko. Let me do the timestamp real quick. I have like a slightly different setup, so it's worse. I hate these awkward pauses.
Clickety clack.
We're gonna play a game. Oh, I love this. I think our community is much more creative than we are when it comes to games.
Yes.
Holy shit. Comes in from Mirko. He says, hello, allies. Now that we are all having a much slower lifestyle, I thought I'd give you guys some brain training to keep the juices flowing. Listed below are some anagrams of popular video games, and it is up to you to solve them. Perhaps write them down to make it easier for yourself. So we have anagrams. I'm going to say something, and you have to tell me like what it is an anagram of. So why don't I just do one of these as an example? So, like, I would say, Halberd Thief 2. And you can rearrange the letters of that to make it Breath of the Wild.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
Yeah. He put quite a lot, so I'm not going to do all of these, but we'll do a few. All right, first one. Lurk So Sad.
Yeah, this is way harder when you can't see.
Yeah, feel free to write it down.
letters.
Feel free to write it down. We can slow roll.
I'm going to try to beautiful mind it. I'm going to try to not write them down.
Lurk So Sad.
Lurk So Sad. The hard thing
is interesting.
The hard thing is like the spaces don't necessarily line up. So
right, yeah.
Lurk So Sad.
Not dusk. The U is fascinating. There's not a lot of U's in game titles. Lurk.
I might give you guys it's 2 words. I'll tell you that. The game title is 2 words.
Oh, okay.
Lurk So Sad.
It's not Hotel Dusk.
No.
There's no H.
Do you want me to give you the first word?
Sure.
Sure. We're going to be here all day.
Dark.
Soul?
Dark
Dark
Souls.
Souls?
Dark Souls.
Ah.
Lurk So Sad.
It does look so sad. Brad, come on. That was count on
This
you.
game's hard, dude.
It's a hard game. It's a hard game for sure. Goof Ward.
Goof word.
I was thinking Warframe maybe, but no, there's no D.
Something 0.
No? Doesn't that say that?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It's not a 00.
Okay.
There is an of. That's 3 words. The middle word is of.
Oh, God of War.
God of War, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Goof Ward.
This is fun. We'll do 1 or 2 more. Invert Diesel. invert diesel.
The V is fascinating. Resident Evil.
Yes!
Yeah, Jones.
Jonesy.
The only franchise with a V.
Yeah, that's not many.
No edgy eel.
Eel.
No.
E-E-L?
E-E-L. Eel, like the swimming eel. No edgy eel.
Not Red Steel.
Red Steel.
No. No edgy eel. This one's tough. It's only one word, actually.
No edgy eel.
Dishonored? No.
No.
There's a G in there.
Yes.
Where's that G
Yeah, the G is
go?
very important.
G.
No.
Shit.
3 E's. 3 E's and a G. Oh.
The G is the first letter.
GoldenEye?
GoldenEye!
Yes!
No edgy eel.
GoldenEye!
It's GoldenEye. Good job. That was a hard game. Creative
Oh
game.
my
though.
Wow.
god.
Yeah.
That was intense.
Next email comes in from Morgan. Hello, Ben and Paddle from beautiful Colorado. A lot of companies are killing it with remakes and remasters these days. I would reference a title, but I don't really need to because we're basking in what seems like great classic video game revival. I believe that older titles suffered from graphical and hardware limitations, and newer versions allow a creator's vision to be fulfilled. But with graphical advances becoming smaller and smaller with each new console, will nostalgia be the only draw for future remakes and remasters? My question is, what will make today's games worthy of being remade or remastered in 20 years? Will it have to be a new way to play, like VR? Will it be hyper-realistic graphics technology?
Could be all the above, man. I don't know. And I feel like developers' imaginations will grow with the technology. There'll always be something people are striving for that they can't quite accomplish yet.
Yeah, I wonder if this generation would manifest itself kind of similarly to Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 remastered. But Modern Warfare 2 Remastered was just single player. They still haven't done anything multiplayer with that, right?
Yes.
Whereas the first Modern Warfare did get a whole multiplayer suite, and they brought those servers back.
Yeah.
So I think that would be interesting. You know, like if we ever do see an end to something like Fortnite or Apex Legends or any of these games that only exist because they are played multiplayer, and then after they're gone, it's like, yeah, that somebody might set up their own server or something. I imagine Epic would crush that pretty quickly, but it'd be interesting to see, 10, 20 years from now, something like this resurface, and just genres that are just played out. We just don't experience those genres. To have nostalgia, not necessarily for a character or a story or music or something, or to see characters realized in a different way, Final Fantasy VII Remake style, but just, have like your kids or younger friends of yours be like, whoa, this genre is weird. And like, yeah, we used to play games like this a ton. And then it just, like MMOs,
I think Morgan is right that a lot of it is nostalgia, but I think a lot of it is also convenience. When a lot of times when somebody upgrades to a new console, they get rid of the old one. And so it's like, oh, well, this re-released, I can, I couldn't play it unless it came out on the thing that I have. And so I think that drives sales a lot. But the other thing that you're seeing with a lot of these re-releases, Xenoblade and Persona are good examples, is they're actually like adding on to the story. So that makes it interesting as well, where it's like, oh, well, I was satisfied with the story and I probably wouldn't replay this again, but I want to see, what that new thing is. So
I also like, shout out to Blood, who did a great Don't Skip on the TurboGrafx Mini. And it was interesting to follow him kind of like at like a hometown buffet, where he's just like little mashed potatoes, some peas, some clam chowder, and just trying things that he necessarily maybe wouldn't even try. And then you kind of, you're not only getting a sense of what a system could do, but also like that era, and it kind of reminds me of Rare Replay, where you're not only going and experiencing, Banjo-Kazooie again and Perfect Dark again, but just kind of getting a sense of this company and just kind of like what their interests were. And, if they made some offshoot weird game that you never played, once you go back and play all the other games they were making at the time and then finally play that game, it puts your brain in a different place to kind of understand like, oh yeah, this was kind of outside their wheelhouse. wheelhouse. And, like, I'm a huge Rockstar fan, but I never enjoyed the Manhunt series. And it'd be interesting to go back and not only, try Manhunt 1 and 2, but, like, play GTA 3 and Vice City and these other games, and the Warriors and these other games, like, at the same time, even just dabble in them to get a sense of, like, the things that they learned from. I feel like Assassin's Creed has evolved that way, where you see one game add a feature that then the next game, even though a totally different studio is making it, they're like, oh, thanks, yoink. And they're like, we'll take that and put our own spin on it.
Our last email comes in from Eric. Just got done watching the Ghost of Tsushima. The way that he pronounced it will always trip me out now. Tsushima trailer, and I think it looks awesome. But I'm finding myself not getting too hyped. And I think the reason why is that Sony has already given us something like 10 or more games in this genre this generation. Seems like all their first-party output these days are single-player only, third-person cinematic action-adventure. No one could eat ice cream every day, even if you change up the flavors and topping. Nathan Drake and Joel can use a gun, and Aloy can use a bow, and the Ghost of Tsushima could use a sword, but it's still eating ice cream again. They got so many, they can't even keep their games in the genre about zombies to one franchise. How about a platformer, or a shooter, or a strategy game, or a dungeon crawler, or a freaking multiplayer game? They used to make SOCOM, Twisted Metal, Starhawk, and MAG, right? And it's not as if third parties aren't also making these games, so they're not even alone in the genre. My question is this. While I don't think people are going to get sick of this in the short term, in the long term, say 4 to 5 years, can you see this backfiring if they don't start to diversify? Are they immune to oversaturation?
I think they're making a lot of games like this right now because they sell. People want a lot of games like this. And like SOCOM today would not survive. Like a game like that cannot survive against other games like Counter-Strike or Valorant now. It's going to be harder to get, like, slices of that pie. I just, like, because they tried Twisted Metal, and no one gave a shit about it. And they've tried stuff here and there. I think they're going to do more than just, like, the third-player or third-person single-player focused games like that. But that's what the studios wanted to make right now. But I'm sure there's going to be other stuff. Like, Dreams. They own Media Molecule, don't they?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell is that game? That game is ridiculously insane, and that's a first-party game. So I think there's still room for experimentation there.
Yeah, I think there's a cinematic quality to all the examples that they gave, where I think about this Xbox reveal that we got of Xbox gameplay, and some of those games were really exciting, and just getting your head out of what the new console is going to deliver, and us just super hungry for new IPs. Like, what are the launch lineups going to be for these new consoles? Just kind of forgetting all of that and being like, that looks like a fun co-op game. Like, there was still a lot to enjoy from that Xbox presentation, but like cinematically, it doesn't necessarily sell. And I think when I think back to all of the big PlayStation 4 commercials and the big E3 montages and them just really showing these kind of big tentpole experiences, you think about Spider-Man and Horizon and Uncharted and, Tsushima and just how it's so easy to sell them cinematically. It's so easy just to show the main character from the game and you go, yep, I know exactly what that is. Whereas you could show me a bit of Valorant and like, I might not know what it is. I could identify it right away. And I just think that's Sony. I think even though you can still dig around the PSN store and find like really interesting experiences that are exclusive to that system or heavily promoted by Sony, but when it's time for the big show, when it's time to really spend millions on commercials, they're only going to do it on stuff that has a strong narrative pull from a small cast of characters, that they can cast someone as, like you have that PSN that commercial where Nathan Drake crashes through the ceiling and then like grabs his grappling hook, and it's like I think that's how they're used to selling their stuff, and so they get excited when presented from these companies with an IP that they're like, oh yeah, that'll we can, that just fits neatly into a montage. That's my trailer brain answering that question.
Brent, I agree with everything that you're saying, and Brad, I agree with you too. But I get where this person is coming from. Like, even watching Ghost of Tsushima, like Huber and I had, and Brad, you were there as well. We had a conversation of it during Weekly Hunts, and I was like, I kind of feel like maybe I've played this before. Like there is a similarity between these things where it's not even like a knock on the quality. I think these games are often very high quality. But I do get frustrated sometimes where they sort of feel like games that are made to sell. And I know that that is a very obvious thing to say. Of course, games are made to be sold. But I think as this business goes on, companies get better at figuring out what appeals to the most amount of people. And I miss, and this could just be nostalgia, but I do miss, like, the PS1 era insanity where, like, you know, Parappa the Rappa was getting as much attention as, like, you know, Metal Gear Solid or whatever. And I agree. I think these companies have a lot of power. I think first-party games have a lot of power. And so I do commend them when they go into new genres and new directions. But the obvious answer there is that, right, like, they're not seeing the financial reward for that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I always think of, like, Puppeteer on PS3, how, like, cool and awesome that game was, and no one cared.
Right, exactly. And so, right, everything that I'm saying is moot if people just don't care.
Yeah. But I feel like you could get a lot of that kind of experimentation you might be looking for from smaller games.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of smaller games are much more willing to take risks out there.
Right.
Like Sony, like, these games they're making are so expensive, and they need to see a return on it. Most of the time. So, like, they're about... of course, they want to make a really great game, but they have to make something that'll make them money.
I think it's a difference between Microsoft right now and Sony, whereas I think Microsoft is much more willing to highlight those things, a la Phantasy Star Online 2. You know, that, like, Sony might not give the level of attention to, you know, as much as Microsoft would, because I think Microsoft is really interested in appealing to their player base, to making people that have already invested in Microsoft satisfied with their investment because they're seeing all of these fun new properties come to their console. And Sony's like, if we're going to put money into advertising something, that thing has to break records. Like, that thing has to be huge.
Well,
and so there's just safe bets. Sony's just playing one safe bet after the other, and it's working.
Honestly, I don't think Microsoft has games like that to show right now. So that's why they don't show them a lot. Like, of course, when Gears was coming up, they were, like, showing off Gears. Like, here's our big first-party, like, big blockbuster game. But it's like, right now, they haven't shown anything like that. Like, Last of Us and Ghost of Tsushima are, like, a month apart from each other, or a couple months from each other. And it's like, these are very big games, and Microsoft's probably saving a lot of their big stuff. Like Halo, like, they're going to wait to show that kind of stuff.
I do think part of this, though, is why I have such an attachment to Nintendo. And I think you could flip it where, like, in terms of tone, there are a lot of similar stuff with first-party games. But I feel like, you know, things that get a lot of attention from them, you have, like, a Luigi's Mansion 3, and then you have, like, a Captain Toad, and then you have, like, a Fire Emblem Three Houses. And I do feel like there's a lot of diversity in ideas, and then you have something like Splatoon or ARMS. I don't even like ARMS that much, but it's super weird, and I'm happy that it exists. And I that is something that I always admire about Nintendo, is I think from a first-party standpoint, things consistently get pretty weird, which I like. Like, Origami King looks weird.
Like, stuff's weird, but it also, like, is familiar. It's like, how many Paper Marios have there been?
Sure, that's fair. I think that's a fair counter to that. And
it's like, how many 3D Marios have they been? It's like, on the surface, they look very similar. Like, as someone like me who hasn't really played a lot of Paper Mario, I don't know what's really different about this one. But, like, once you maybe get in the nitty gritty, you could see something.
But I'm that's just comparing, like, Paper Mario with itself. I'm saying, like, for a first-party library, like, a Paper Mario is very different from a Splatoon, which is very different from...
I mean, I would have to look at, like, an actual list of everyone's first parties, but, like, even just Dreams coming out recently.
Dreams is a great example.
One of the most ambitious games of all time.
Right. Yeah, and, like, Dreams is so fascinating, and definitely not for everybody, and definitely something that is not going to appeal to a ton of people in the same way,
like,
you know.
Like, Sony had, like, Astrobot.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this crazy VR game. It's like, that's like a weird experiment.
Right.
Yeah. Iron Man VR. It's going to be interesting to see how well that does sales-wise in July.
I think taking all three companies, though, taking Nintendo and taking Microsoft and taking Sony, like, I think it is possible to find very distinct weaknesses in all three of them. But taking it together, right, there is a lot of diversity. especially if you're willing to throw PC gaming into that mix as well. And like if you're somebody that is fortunate enough to mess around with all of these platforms, I think you are very satisfied by the diversity that's available.
Yeah. I think of it like games like Drawn to Death that Sony like kind of was behind for a while.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, that game died because no one cared about it. It's like there's people try to do a lot of these ideas for stuff like this that just no one cared.
And it can feel different because it's tough to gauge what quote unquote Sony is doing based on what they spend the most time talking about. Whereas you could just jump into the PSN store and be like, what is this weird game? And like, just because it wasn't a part of a state of play or just because there's no trailer for it on their YouTube channel, doesn't mean that they're not, throwing some interesting experiences out there, or investing in companies that have fun ideas or made some weird PC game that they want to bring to consoles. But especially right now, it's just like Sony's not gonna make many moves outside of stuff that is specifically going to sunset the PS4 in a fantastic way, or specifically like all but force people to get a PS5.
They had Knack too, man. There's 2 Knack games.
You know what?
That's all you had to say.
we were saying Dreams is a really good kind of counter to this argument. Death Stranding is like
Death Stranding, like that's
one of the weirdest games I've played this
it's
generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Like they don't own Kojima, but it's like they were heavily involved in this game.
I mean, it is a PS4 right now. It is a PS4 exclusive game.
Yeah, it's like Final Fantasy VII is right now still.
Yeah. So I don't know,
but I get it because like you're seeing Ghost of Tsushima and like God of War and Last of Us kind of in like in a close time period, so I could understand that.
Yeah, I think this is an argument that maybe is not strictly true, but just kind of a feeling that somebody's getting, and I'm sympathetic toward that feeling where it's like, crazy ideas.
And I need that stuff because again, I'm Captain Towers. Like I'm the guy that like once Tsushima, once he got on his horse and started riding around, and they're like, you follow the wind to your next objective, and there's way too many things to do on the horizon than you can do in one evening sitting. And I'm just like, saddle up, let's do it. Where I it's really helpful to hear those voices of people that are like, I played this, it's just like, I'm excited because that's my jam. But
I mean, I'm excited from the studio's pedigree on that game.
Right.
Like, I love the Sly Cooper games. I liked the Infamous games quite a bit. So they've been working on this game for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm super curious about it.
That's going to do it for Frame Trap. Thank you so much to my panelists, Bradley Ellis and Brandon Jones. If you would like to write into Frame Trap, you can email askeasyallies@gmail.com. One more time, that is askeasyallies@gmail.com. Good emails this episode. Please send in more. I appreciate it. Appreciate how thoughtful you guys are. If you want to find out more about us, go to patreon.com/easyallies, where we do a whole bunch of stuff. We review games. We have other podcasts. We have other shows. A lot of new stuff. Not a lot. There's one new thing on the horizon. It's not really my place to talk about it, but you'll see it. You'll see it relatively soon. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time.